across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. It's just approaching 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I am Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, whether you are watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much indeed for your company. Lots to talk about today, as always, and an awful lot of the conversation I want to talk to you about is about, well, not just what's happening in Iran, but again, as we've done for the last couple of weeks, talk about how it's affecting us at home. If you miss anything from the show, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, never have to miss a thing. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to be joined by the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, who's going to walk about in Surrey. We're going to get her thoughts on all things at home and abroad. Also, we're going to ask her about Donald Trump criticising the terrible leadership of Keir Starmer. I mean, does she agree? I mean, I think she probably does agree with that, but does she agree with what Keir Starmer has actually done in terms of policy, in terms of not getting involved in the Iran war? 70% of people, apparently, according to a poll, saying that they would support not getting involved in the war in Iran. Not our problem is what pretty much all European leaders are saying. Apart from the fact, of course, it is very much our problem if 20% of the world's oil and gas supply can't get out of the Strait of Hormuz, because that's actually, weirdly, not really that big an issue for America, what with them being pretty much self-sufficient. Net exporters, biggest net exporter of oil and gas in the world, indeed. So it is kind of going to be our problem, as is often the case with international affairs, whether we like it or not. So we'll be talking about that. Also, Rachel Reeves' big speech tonight. Apparently she's going to talk about her vision. Rachel Reeves has got a vision, Paul the other one. She wants to forge closer ties with the EU. She says that's what we need to do to help Britain grow again. Yeah, let's forge closer ties with the continent that has got the least growth in the entire world, and then we'll do better. I mean, after these people, do they even have calculators? You've got to wonder. A lot of people pointing out maybe her abacus is broken again. Also going to be talking about that meningitis outbreak. Fears that it could spread nationwide. Emergency measures being taken across Kent to stop that outbreak. Any parent who's gone through one of those panics for their own child, I'm among them, will absolutely understand what is going on there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any and all of the topics we're talking about today, but in particular, Donald Trump blasting Keir Starmer's terrible leadership over Iran. This, though, amid fears of fuel rationing for motorists as a result of the crisis. Speed limits, again, I don't know. I mean, we're at 20 miles per hour on pretty much every road in my local area. I mean, there's going to come a point, it's not a point even driving. We could walk it quicker. But also, talk about whether we need more bailouts for people's energy bills at home, for businesses. What is your reaction to all of that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Calls are charged at a national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV, and that's free. Joining me today, delighted to say, is Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, yeah. Where do we start on this? Look, I mean, you know that thing when you slag off your own family?
Yeah.
And you go, I can't believe X or Y, obviously my family is thinking, I never do this. But if you slag off your own family, and you even to your other half, and you criticise them, and that's fine, right? Yeah. And then they, and then there'll be a time when they criticise your family, and you go, whoa, I don't think so. That's my family you're talking about. Do you feel that at all? I know you're not a card-carrying Labour member,
really.
Far from it. Not a Keir Starmer supporter in particular, but when the American president starts, for want of a technical term, slagging off our leader of our country, our Prime Minister, say he's not happy with him for refusing to join the war in Iran, criticising his terrible leadership, does any part of you go, hold on a minute?
It does a little bit. I mean, it's not because it's Keir Starmer, because I think my own reasons, I'm not happy with him either. Yeah. But I don't really enjoy it when the president of a different country says you're all terrible and you're being run in a very bad way. You're like, well, hold up a second.
Although to be fair, most of the current Labour cabinet have at some point criticised Donald Trump.
Yeah, they have.
So, swings and roundabouts.
It is swings and roundabouts, but I think it's this relentless onslaught of how terrible our country is.
Donald Trump does seem to be picking on Britain in terms of our failure to be a part of this. Germany aren't sending boats to help and clear the Strait of Hormuz. France sent a load of warships to the area, but it's more about protecting their own interests and protecting the Med and the like. South Koreans, everyone's basically gone. Not nine, whatever. I'm trying to think of the other words. I'm not a great linguist, as you can probably tell. But they're not interested. But he seems to be saving his attacks for us, or are we just seeing that's the only stuff he's reporting? It does seem very strange. He says the UK should enthusiastically help clear the Strait of Hormuz with the US. But the reality is, we don't have the capability of doing that. So it's kind of a moot point, isn't it? Here's the question. Given that, we don't want to get involved in this war. Fair enough. I get that. America's more than enough firepower, as does Israel. Israel's been doing most of the heavy lifting, by the way. Is there, we've got a war in Ukraine we need to be worrying about. We've barely got the capability to defend Ukraine, let alone ourselves. So let's be realistic. Is there an argument that this could have been handled much better by Keir Starmer? Such as any conversation remains private with Donald Trump, but explaining, look, this is the pressures we're under. We're going to give you all the vocal support we can, even though he's going to take a massive hit from his Labour benchers and his cabinet and the Green Party, etc. But the need for Britain to maintain, especially at the point where we simply do not have the wherewithal to defend ourselves and our allies, the safety of that US umbrella of safety that we get from NATO, but let's face it, we get from America specifically, that in terms of our long-term strategic interests and safety is more important.
Okay. Do I think that it's been handled well? No, I don't. There are so many mistakes that you could point to from Keir Starmer. I think his largest problem is he cannot make a decision. And he cannot make it quickly.
About anything?
No, about absolutely anything. But sending a ship, which should have gone 3-4 weeks ago, it's on its way slowly out there. So
and let's face it, this manoeuvre of all these warships, this has been happening for quite a few weeks. They knew it was happening. And we now know from the White House, February they were early February they were asking the Prime Minister for help, and so they had plenty of time.
But I think there were even alerts coming in January, so you've got plenty of time to move your ships around, if that's the technical term. So no, I don't.
Get us.
I know.
You're the one from the military family, love.
Yeah, army. No,
army,
not
army.
boats. I'm not very good on the sea.
Fair enough.
But I do think that Donald Trump reserves an awful lot of hatred for the UK. He thinks that we should be picking up.
But he loves us. His mum's a big Anglophile.
Until we don't do exactly as he pleases. Exactly. And then he throws a massive tantrum over it. And he's not doing that over any other nation. Australia, they're not sending anybody. They've been very brutal and said, no, it's not.
I think Australia have got a fair point. They're literally like, hey, not an issue for us.
They are, but
not an issue.
It will affect them, especially if we ever need to go and come to their aid.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because it is going to be affecting everybody. Again, this is the thing. It's, you don't often get a choice about whether a war has anything to do with you or not. You really just don't. In the same way that the attack on the base, the UK military base in Cyprus, we weren't involved. We didn't allow America to use Diego Garcia to. I think quite wrongly. I think that's absolutely should have allowed them to do that. What's the point?
It's kind
otherwise,
of what it's there for.
Yeah, literally. And then we got attacked by Iran. So there you go, guys. You don't get to pick and choose. We are involved in that war. We're certainly going to feel the impact because we are so dependent on imported gas and oil because of insane choices made by former Conservative government and this current Labour government on net zero. We haven't got the wherewithal to actually keep ourselves with the lights on, do anything. There's now talk about, a former senior advisor, Nick Butler, to Gordon Brown, he was a BP executive of the oil company. He has suggested, we could be looking at rationing of fuel, rationing of petrol and diesel for motorists in the coming weeks. We're looking at maybe speed limits being cut because that means you'll use less fuel. Again, how? We're at 20 miles per hour. My little area, there's I suppose technically not a dual carriageway, but it's a ridge route in and out of London. It's a major route through London, and it's 3 lanes on both sides of the road. With the railing in between, and we're at 20 miles per hour along that. Everyone's just driving along, just thinking, bring an early death to me, because this is so boring and pointless. And even at midnight, at 4 a.m, because I'm so worried about kids running out into the street. Also, by the way, people, teach your kids how to cross the road. Tell them to put their phone down when they cross the road, and maybe they wouldn't be all at risk from people driving at 30 miles per hour. But that's apparently the plan, and they're going to be rationing how much fuel we can buy at the petrol pump. Now, I don't need to fill up my car from 1 month to the next because we don't drive, but we're very lucky, public transport. Most people don't have public transport. If you work using your vehicle, you have to drive to get somewhere, or live like you in a rural area in Kent.
Yeah.
Can't ration fuel to people. It's a necessity.
It is, and it's all things like, well, what happens with the emergency services? And we've seen this before when oil plants get blockaded and there is a sudden run on fuel, and the emergency services get priority access. But are they going to be told that they're only allowed to fill up with sort of 50 quid's worth of fuel?
I'm hoping not.
I'm hoping not.
And who decides who the priority people are?
And this is your problem. And we've seen this during COVID. Who was designated to be a key worker? And then that was
I was, which is terrifying.
So was I, which is also terrifying.
I mean,
why? I didn't need to be anywhere. I shouldn't have been on that list. And I didn't abuse it. But who's going to make the decision? Because I think that plumbers are pretty essential.
I'm good. As someone who's had flooding in their home, I'm actually going to say I support this remark.
Yeah, and all of those kind of trades that we need. People living in rural areas, and I speak from experience here, you have no choice but to use your car. And how much are they going to let me have in my car? I don't know. And who is going to tell me how fast to drive? What are they going to do? Put the police out there? I'd rather they were out catching criminals rather than me going at 50.
God forbid, 22. We're told, there's going to be help. Yesterday with that announcement, that 53 million quid heating oil bailout. Apparently, it's basically only worth £35 to each. I mean, gee, thanks. Bearing in mind, back in 22, Liz Truss announced that huge, 65. But they said it could be up to a £60 billion bailout. Sorry, 160 billion. I mean, these numbers, they're made up numbers, aren't they? It ended up, we think, costing in the region of 65 billion because the oil price didn't spike so much as many had expected. But I mean, people are not going to be getting the help. There's a lot of talk about, well, luckily we're heading into spring. The daffs are out in my garden. It doesn't look very spring-like out there today, but so actually for a lot of people, there's snow in some areas of Britain right now, so lots of people maybe not needing to rely on heating for staying alive. If you're elderly or infirm and you need to have the heating on in the middle of winter all day every day. But we are in difficult territory, and let's face it, there is no money, and we have moved on, I'd like to think, from the the post-lockdown, if in doubt, get the government to pay for it, under the bizarre illusion that the government has its own money.
And that was the thing, listening to the press conference yesterday, I listened to Keir Starmer. It was half an hour of my life I'm never getting back. But there was...
Can I just say, can we just give her a little round of applause for that? Because, I have someone listening to it, so we don't, I can't do it. I can't do it.
I honestly was sort of hiding behind my hands. I had a cushion in front of me at one point, so I was sitting at home listening to it, which is even worse, in my living room.
Let me be clear. Whenever he says, let me be clear.
And the detail of this so-called bailout for those using heating oil were non-existent. He sort of bigged it up as some great announcement. And when you actually look at the figures and you think this is going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever for some people who have no choice. They're not on grid.
No. What do you make? And we're going to put this to Kemi Baden. In fact, she's going to be in about half an hour. She's going to be live on the show. Reform have pledged to scrap VAT and green levies on energy bills. Which would massively bring them down. I mean, when you look at these graphs, everyone's producing these pie charts over the weekend showing how much of your energy bills. When the government says, well, your energy bills are high because of, because we're too reliant on fossil fuels and energy giants making massive profits. And, they're making like sort of 6%. And actually the vast majority of the cost of your bill is actually... the government taxes, whether it's fuel duty or whether it's green levies or VAT. I mean, that would make a big difference. It would make a big dent in government coffers, though. That's the only issue. But there's an element where energy costs, the costs of energy bills, fuel costing, this costs everybody. It has a massive impact on people's home lives. It has a massive impact, of course, on businesses as well. Would that be something that you would support?
I think... not so much with the VAT, and I think it's complicated because there are two levies against them. There's the fuel duty and there's VAT.
Yep.
So you've got two different levels. I think you could do something around the rate of VAT that is paid. You could reduce that. If you take it away, you are losing money into the Treasury, and you have to be quite brutal about it. Absolutely. And who wants to increase their taxes? Fuel duty, I think you can work on that as well. I think you can reduce it. I think getting rid of it would be a retrograde step. How are you going to get any investment? The one area that you could actually look at are the bosses of these energy companies who are raking in enormous
that's none of my business.
No.
I know if someone works for a private company that's paid all the tax, they're on like 78% tax rates and things, you know, for these oil from the North Sea. If they bring added value in a private company and someone wants to pay them £1 billion a week, it's none of my business.
But do you not think that the energy companies should have a fund for those who are, you know, little Mrs. Miggins sitting there?
But we do. But it's already but we already subsidise.
It's not enough.
Our bill, your and my bills, and people will, if you're in work and your bills already include a cost that subsidises the cost of people who can't afford to pay.
But that's where I think the energy companies actually need to put more into that.
Why? They're not a charity.
No, I know they're not a charity, but I think if you're looking to deal with energy as a whole, then you need to look at a whole suite of measures.
But the government could just not put fuel duty and VAT, in fact, on people. If I was going to be cutting, you know, any sort of the green levies and all of that, and I would do it on the fuel people used to travel around with, because genuinely that massively cuts the cost for the vast majority of people in this country. It cuts costs for everything that you buy. It cuts costs for every company that is moving goods. That could have a real impact in terms of just dampening down the costs that people are facing every single day. You know, when you wonder, like, oh, why has everything gone up in the supermarket? Because, you know, even just, you know, heating, you know, making the fertiliser for the food, heating the factory, that working, you know, the fuel in the factory to make whatever it is, and then the transportation of it, all of that is taxed to high heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and this is the problem we see with, especially with food prices, the amount that it costs farmers to buy fertiliser, if you can actually buy it at the moment, because it's really difficult to get a hold of. It is enormously expensive and will boost that.
You want to get rid of fossil fuels, you do. The Sri Lanka did that. They tried to go all green for some mad nonsense reason. Well, it doesn't work. People end up starving, and then they end up storming the presidential palace, which is exactly what would happen in this country if we got rid of food fertiliser. Because fossil fuels vital for fertiliser. That's how you have enough food. The reason why, you know, all these, you know, these Malthusian predictions about, oh, we could never have a population of even 1 billion on the planet, let alone the 7 or 8 billion we've got now, was because of fossil fuels. They're the reason we're alive. They're literally the reason we're alive. Everyone's got to just stop. Just get with the programme. Let's talk about one other story before we go to a break, because I want to talk about this meningitis spread. As soon as I saw that word, you know, on Sunday, where they were talking about this spread in Kent, we've had two young people who have died. One an A-level student, one is a university student at Kent. We've had this, basically, I think it's a small spread through a nightclub. The antibiotics being handed out to thousands of students in Kent to stop the spread. They're actually calling for anybody who attended this particular nightclub in Kent to basically come forward and come and get help over 3 nights. But it's interesting because it was over a week ago. Well over a week ago, that they think this is all spread. But there's a lot of criticism of the UK Health Security Agency, the UK HSA, for not coming to the public sooner. So on Friday, they notified doctors, look, if you get people coming with flu-like bugs, test for meningitis, it may be an issue. But they didn't bother telling the public, despite the fact that, again, when people know about meningitis, it's that very nasty rash, isn't it? Well, it can also be hangover symptoms. Who gets hangovers? Students. You know, it does seem like they've been a little bit too slow.
Yes.
And we've got 11 young people in hospital being treated right now, as well as there's 2 deaths.
And it's interesting listening to the uni students. I mean, I live in Kent, so my local news has been all over this. And the students were saying that they hadn't been given any information up until it was released to the public in general. So they hadn't been given any advance warning. They had been given no advice that they may need to seek medical attention. And they didn't really know the details about it. And when you're dealing with young people, you have to lay that out really clearly. You need to go to a doctor. You need to get some antibiotics. You know, have you been in this club? Listed out bullet points. Tell them to phone home if in doubt.
And universities all have emails for every single student. You make sure you go through the university. Yeah, I mean, this is the club chemistry in Canterbury. It's got a capacity of 1,600. This place.
Yes.
March 5th, 6th, and 7th. Basically, if you attended one of those events that night, you may need to go and possibly, just seek advice and possibly get these antibiotics. I mean, a lot of youngsters have been vaccinated, but again, this is the B strain. Although the C strain that people have been vaccinated for. I mean, the first thing I did was message my daughter and just say, just checking what have you been. I remember everything was up to date when you went to uni, just checking what you've had. But of course, no one her age, university age, has actually been vaccinated. They've started those vaccinations for young students. They'll be coming through in the next 5-10 years. But we had a meningitis scare when she was 3 years old, when it genuinely just like a few spots, again, literally like 3 or 4 spots. Horrendous. And it was just like, just took her to the doctor. The doctor went, you need to go to hospital now. And I just went, oh, OK, well, now, this afternoon. No, you need to go to hospital now. There'll be a paediatrician waiting at the door of the emergency room. And literally just got in a cab, just got straight there. And they were, I cannot tell you, she was taken from me and taken straight down. She was on a drip within 2 minutes. She was pumped full of antibiotics. I've got to be honest with you. It was a terrifying few hours of my life. The one day of the year, my husband was out of town for work as well, one of those. And they basically said, they were able to tell us by the end of the day that she did not have meningitis. They said, but by the time we get the test results back, it's often too late. And they treat 19 children without meningitis with this pump full of antibiotics for every one that actually has it. But they say the cost of getting it wrong is so great. Yes. That they play safe, and thank God, and she was fine. But just those few hours, absolutely, your baby on a drip. And a very good friend of ours who's actually regular here at Talk, I won't give his name, but his child almost over Christmas, gosh, about 15 years ago, almost died. And I mean, literally, it would touch and go for days. It was a teenager at the time. This is a nasty disease. People need to take it seriously. Sod your COVID, people. For young people, meningitis is a killer.
And I'd like to understand the reason why they don't roll this vaccination out, because anything prior to 2015, so that's my child, your child, wouldn't have it. But they are the group that are going to be most at risk when it comes to an outbreak. So why aren't they doing it?
Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Hear your thoughts at all on Donald Trump's criticism of Keir Starmer's terrible leadership. I mean, tell us something we don't know, Donny. But also, the possibility of basically having fuel rationing or limits on the speed limits, even lower than they already are, as a result of the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to take your calls up next, and we're going to be talking to the brilliant Carl Hennigan about this meningitis breakout, and then we're going to be talking to Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives. Busy hour. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:28 is the time. Lots of common sense coming from you on the phone lines now. 0344 499 1000, talking about Donald Trump blasting Keir Starmer's leadership has been terrible over Iran. Also fears now of basically of us having fuel rationing, indeed even lower speed limits to try and stop fuel being used up by motorists so quickly as a result of the crisis, which we don't want to be part of the war, but we may not have a choice. Let's talk to Marion, who is in Norfolk. Hello, Marion. What do you want to say?
Good morning. I love your show.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
I'm a US Navy and REN veteran. So I have thoughts about the war, whether it was wrong or right. But closer to home, we are looking at possibility of food shortages. We can't say it's not going to happen, but I have no confidence in this government. Look how they handled COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have panic buying, hoarding. You could go on with the apocalyptic responses to what's coming. So what's the government's...
What's their plan?
Do they have a plan?
I'm going to tell you right now, they do not have a plan. I don't need to do any research on that. I can tell you that 100%. They have no plan for anything whatsoever. Even the stuff that they talked about having a plan for before the general election in 24, they don't have a plan for it, I would assume.
Yeah, so it's like everything is a knee-jerk reaction after the fact. Oh, we're thinking about it, we're considering it, we're talking about it. And one more joke, let them eat cake. Is that it?
Yeah. No, but that's the... Here's the thing. Again, we'll have... If we talk about how there may be, petrol or diesel rationing, at that point, people then go, oh, do you know what? I don't need to fill up, but I'm going to go and fill up. And I was thinking, I only fill up once, God knows how long, because I don't use the car most times. But maybe I'll fill up and just get it done now. And if we all do that, petrol stations don't have enough. They just don't have enough for the whole country to fill up in the matter of a week. They're allowing for the people like me who go along once a month.
And the other thing I thought of was if people can't take their cars anywhere because they have no fuel, how about making public transportation during these difficult times a little bit more affordable, giving some sort of benefit there?
Well, the only really expensive travel is trains, and that's just already a subsidy to the middle classes as it is. I'm not in favour of helping that lot anymore while they have their bigger houses further out of town and expect me to fund their travel into the city centre. No, I genuinely, really ease me off. But you're just saying that basically you don't think there's a plan. You think this is going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, it could all be resolved in days or weeks and it'll be fine. We just don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think that you said you had views on whether or not we should have got involved or not? Should we?
Well, I mean, having been in the military, I was not in combat, but I look at it from a point of view. All the West has been attacked through terrorism. And I hate to see people suffering because of this regime. Yeah. That's awful. But how are you going to stop it? We stopped Hitler during the Second World War. Was that wrong?
Well, obviously not. I mean, that was a deeply moral act. But do you think this is our war to fight?
Gosh, that is so difficult. It's just not black or white. It's not cut and dried. It's just... I don't know. We
may not have a choice about whether it's our war, is I suppose the main point. I'd love to hear other people's answers to that question as well. Marion, thank you for that really thoughtful call. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. Is it our war to fight? 70% of the public said they don't want to be involved in this war. Well, good luck with that, but we are involved. Let's go to Craig, who's in Leeds. Hello, Craig. What do you want to say?
Yes, just following on from what the lady was saying, we do need to be involved, and we should have been involved from the start, because the problem is Trump's delivery is absolutely appalling, and that's his biggest problem. His actual facts of things that he talks about, NATO wouldn't exist without America. No, exactly. 62% of NATO has been paid for by America. And it has been for years. So the priorities of this government should be the security of the people here. Now, if that means that we call to the Trump tune, my view, we should be doing that, because without without America, there is no NATO. There is no security here. There is no sitting around and discussing international law. We are absolutely left out.
We basically
out in the middle of nowhere.
When the American president,
all our military.
Yeah, so when the American president calls and says he needs our help, he doesn't really need our help. We haven't got anything to help him with. We should say yes, not because we're a poodle, not because we just want him to like us, but because at the end of the day, our security and our safety and our defence depends on him.
And he wanted to know where people stood. He called people out in Davos where this was concerned, whether people would come to the aid if it was needed. He knows down to the last military hardware that NATO have got left. He knows who's got what to help. He was wanting to see who would actually put their hand up and who would help. There's no way that America don't know what NATO has left.
I think America knows. I doubt very much that Donald Trump does that detail. I'm going to be honest with you. There's no evidence that he has that level of detail. Most of the things he says, he's just discovered in a meeting 10 minutes ago.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think he's very, his delivery is his biggest problem. He's gotten very far in life. You don't become a millionaire. You don't. No,
he started off a millionaire. No, he started off a millionaire. If he'd put all his money on the stock market, he'd have been a richer man than he is now. Although he's going to end the presidency very, very rich because he's basically accruing huge amounts of wealth. I mean, again, any other president would have been impeached for this by now alone. I mean, people say, like, I haven't got Trump derangement syndrome. He was the best. He was by far the best choice at the presidential election. But and I agree with him on Israel. I disagree with him on Ukraine. I think he's probably right on Iran, but I worry he doesn't do the detail that was needed, and that's why we've got this issue with the Strait of Hormuz. And if he did the detail, we wouldn't have that issue.
I think he's just gonna walk away and declare victory and leave after taking over Venezuela. I don't think they really need and care about the oil, to be honest. Now,
no, they don't.
If it comes to a point, I think they'll just walk away from it. But what Starmer should have done is just said he backed it, but they don't have the hardware to do it because we're left in the middle of nowhere because Europe has no security. I've lived in 9 countries and I've seen it. I've seen Congress insider trading and how they make money. Yep. All governments are an absolute nightmare across the world. But NATO itself has hollowed out so much, it's worthless. Yeah. And it relies on America.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Craig, on that. Thank you so much. Really interesting call. Love to hear your thoughts, your response to that. 0344 499 1000. Going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk about that meningitis outbreak in Kent with Carl Hennigan. How worried should we be? And what can we do about it? More importantly, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time coming up. We're going to be talking to the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch. First up, though, let's find out more about this meningitis outbreak in Kent. Carl Hennigan is Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford and joins us. Good morning to you, Carl.
Good morning, Julia.
How worried should youngsters and indeed their parents at the university, the local sixth forms, how worried should they be about this outbreak and the risk to those who've not yet either, 2 tragic deaths, 11 in hospital, not yet succumbed to the disease.
Well, the thing about meningitis is it's carried by a high proportion of the population in their nose and throat, about 10%. In young people, it's about 25%. The key issue here is what the problem is what we call the very high case fatality rate. If the meningitis bacteria gets inside of your bloodstream, the fatality rate can be about 1 in 12, and in this case, it's even higher than that. And that's why everybody's extremely worried. So you've got to separate out that the fact is the invasive disease is very rare. Last year we're talking about 350 cases. Compared to the problem is if you do get that invasive disease, it's a life-threatening emergency that requires you to go to a hospital immediately. In urgent care, we give people immediate antibiotics. Yep. And so if you think or suspect you've got any illness in this region and you're unwell, then that is something you don't want to delay, and that's the issue at hand.
And there has been, I know, younger children will have been given meningitis jabs, but this fact that this is meningitis B, that's not the one that younger people have been jabbed with, and this cohort largely will be unjabbed, won't they?
I think there's something really interesting here, Julie. You'll remember a time you're old enough, if we go back to the late 90s, meningitis was in the news all the time. It was a real killer. Before the introduction of vaccines, this is important, not all vaccines are the same. This has had a dramatic effect. In about 1999, we're talking over 2,500 cases. And like now, we've come down to 300. We introduced the first vaccine in 1999, which was meningitis C. We expanded it. And then in 2015, we started giving the meningitis B vaccine to those under 5. You're right to say, at the moment, the older children, teenagers, adults haven't got that meningitis B vaccine. It's not in the schedule, and it accounts for about 80% of all the cases right now.
Right.
Now, importantly, most of the disease and most of the problems are in under 5s. But these are transitioning through now. I suspect what will happen here is the JCVI, the people who look at the vaccine schedule, will probably introduce a meningitis B booster at some point if this continues to be a problem.
Right.
And what you shouldn't do is panic.
No, exactly. How much is it likely this could spread? We're talking about, we've got a 6th former who's died, we've got a student at Kent University, and it does seem to have been something that was spread around Club Chemistry in Canterbury. It's a venue. It's got a capacity of 1,600 people. It basically said anyone who attended, club nights on the 5th of March, 6th of March, and the 7th of March should come forward. They've got thousands of students lining up to get antibiotics as a precautionary measure, all getting their masks and the like. How much of any of that is it going to actually help this later on? Because hasn't it got an incubation period of 3 days? We're talking now, we're on the 17th of March. Is any of this even needed now, or are we talking about a disease that could have been spreading through the community, spreading through the student union for days and days now?
Well, look, most of us will acquire meningitis in our nose, and then we develop immunity, and the problem is some of us become carriers, about 10%. The point is, when you first get it, that's when you're most at risk before you develop immunity. And that tends to be in these teenagers who are susceptible. The way of connecting it is, unfortunately, as you're talking about kissing, sharing drinks, people have talked about vapes. The most at-risk group are those that live with somebody who has had meningitis. So they're the first group you've got to go to. So if you're in a halls of residence and you live in the same communal area, that's where the public health will be going first to say, let's identify those, because they're the ones really at risk. Versus what they're doing now is saying, well, look, we've got thousands of you. We give you antibiotics. That will eradicate your carriage, and that will hopefully get rid of any onward transmission.
And that's the key thing. The antibiotics, this is about preventing it being spread to other people and it's containing this outbreak.
Correct. So meningitis can be caused by bacteria and viruses. Viral is more common, but the bacteria is rarer but more severe.
Right.
The advantage is you can have antibiotics which can treat, if you get them on early in somebody with the illness, if it is invasive, that can be life-saving, but also what it can do in the group who are now, there's 5 centres opened in Kent and the university, it will help eradicate it from the nose and the throat so that you don't onwardly transmit that.
And do you think that there's been some criticism of the UK Health Security Agency, set up, of course, during COVID, the UK HSA? They basically knew about a cluster of cases, one case, but knew a cluster of cases by last Friday. They notified local doctors, say, look, if people are coming in to the surgery, worth flagging that meningitis is something to look for. But they didn't notify the public until Sunday, and students were not notified in the meantime, people who are most likely to be at risk, most likely to be spreading it. Do you think that they should have spoken out sooner?
Well, I think it's possible, Julia. I think in these circumstances, there needs to be a sort of show and tell when you go look and say, look, if we made a mistake, the key in healthcare is if you make mistakes, is to own up to it and then say, this is what went wrong. And this is how we do it differently going forward. What we can't have is a defensive nature and keep saying everything's okay. So I think the UKHSA, what we have to do is deal with this and then come after the event and say, look, what were the systems? It started on Friday. Really what should happen with the notifications, it's not a problem in the modern world to send out alerts. Everybody knows post-COVID, you could do that every 5 minutes, is to start to go, well, actually, by Saturday, you could have had something in place. And the key is, I mean, this is the early recognition means that people will be more alert, present to health services earlier and not delay, because the key is, you go back to 97, remember the public health campaigns about the glass test and the tumbler test? Well, by the time you get the rash, it's often too late a sign.
That is one of the key things. I remember I was saying a bit earlier, taking my daughter to A&E on advice of the GP, and she had a rash on her arm, and she was 3 years old, and there was just one dot that didn't disappear. It was like, and the genuine was like, straight there, paediatrician waiting at the door. But this thing, some of the symptoms are flu-like. I mean, there's a lot of that going around. But also, the worst case scenario for students, hangover. Someone saying they've got a bad hangover could actually be early sign of meningitis. So what can you tell our audience? And again, not just for young people listening, but also for parents, because we know this affects young children as well. What can they look out for as early signs, and what should they do?
So I think you're right. The early signs are often like influenza-like illness. We get a fever, get a bit unwell, get a little bit delirious in sometimes, or not delirious, sort of tired and fatigued, which is your sort of hangover effect. There are some specific, we talked about the rash, but that tends to be late and doesn't mean you haven't got it. The other one is a headache, because what's happening, it's got inside of your bloodstream, it's got into what we call the meninges, that's meningitis, which is the spinal cord and the brain. So a headache is always a worrying sign for me. The other one is what I call the neck stiffness test. So I would always ask, can you do this? Now, if you've got meningitis, you just can't move your neck because it's so painful, because the meninges are inflamed. So the neck stiffness test is really important. So they're the late signs. So I think I never would worry if a young person says to me, look, I feel unwell, but this is different than before, than what I recognise as a common cold. We would then see them. If we have any signs of concern, a doctor immediately would give, even on the scene in urgent care or in general practice, a dose of antibiotics before transferring you to hospital. Because we know early antibiotics make a big difference when it comes to...
And the risk is just... Can I just ask, why does this disease particularly affect very young children and late teens, early 20s? Why those particular groups?
Because what happens is two things. Is once you're young, you get infected, and then you develop the immunity.
Right.
So you have to remember, when you're born, you're basically born with an immune-naive system. The key, though, is as you get to be older, as you come together, is what we know in close inclined spaces like the nightclub, military barracks. We get these where people can transmit it really easy because of kissing, sharing drinks, sharing vapes.
Stop snogging everybody.
Yeah, but don't share your drinks and things like that or the vapes, which is another way.
Right.
And so, again, you're developing your immune system. Older adults still get meningitis, but it tends to be when your immune system is dysfunctioning. So people with HIV can get it a lot, but older adults do. So it's not impossible when you're older. It's rare, but it still happens.
Right, okay.
What we do see is across the world there are certain belts, people will look at it, the Saharan belt, where there's much more meningitis. But the WHO, you have to say sometimes it does some good things, is going in there and trying to eradicate it by establishing a vaccine program to reduce the transmission in these high-risk areas.
Absolutely. Really good to talk to you. Thank you. So informative, as always. Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Appreciate that. Get Claire Pearsall's thoughts on that. We're going to get a caller out. She's had meningitis in just a couple of moments. Just Kemi Badenoch will be on the show. True Kemi Badenoch style. She's running late. She's going to interview somewhere else at the moment. She will be on just after 11 o'clock. Stay tuned for that. This is Talk.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:51 is the time. Claire Pearsall's still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and as I say, Kemi Badenoch coming up in about 10 minutes' time. We are hoping. She's currently doing another interview, getting through them all today. This meningitis outbreak, I mean, it is a scare, but we should call it an outbreak, not a scare, really, shouldn't we? Yeah. And it's interesting, always. Who's your go-to guy? Go to Carl Hennigan. He's not just a professor of evidence-based medicine. He's worked, he works in A&E every weekend in Oxford. He knows what he's looking for. But I mean, these are really scary times. So parents and whether your kid's at sixth form, whether your kid's a student or not a student, like they're going to these nightclubs, and they sound like a judge then. They're going to these nightclubs listening to bands called the Beatles sometimes, and they are at higher risk than we are. And
that was really interesting what Carl was saying about why the two groups, why young children and then teenagers are the ones most at risk. I thought that was really fascinating. But I've started to look at, can I get my child a private jab for it? And all the pharmacies around me don't have enough.
Apparently it's about 200 quid as well.
It is about 200 quid. But you sort of look at it and you think, but this is my child. So I would absolutely do that. But they haven't got enough. And they should be vaccinating those who are most at risk.
I do have such an issue with people who are just the anti-vaxxers. I didn't think young people shouldn't have had the COVID jab. I thought, you remember me, young people were not at risk from COVID unless they had other underlying health issues, and they were offered COVID jab very early on. I mean, again, people in their 20s in my office, they would just be, I want a COVID jab just so I can travel. I don't care anymore. I just want to get out and live my life again. But when the UK should say, JCVI, when they recommended gave in to the government and recommended that kids got the jab. I mean, that's that point when the British scientific and medical establishment, they done with you guys. You did something that you knew was a risk to children and that was not a benefit to them. And that is, I mean, again, in my view, should be a criminal act. It's, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was just absolutely appalling. But, you know, this is a disease that does actually impact young people.
And that's the really worrying thing, that people have lost such confidence in the scientific community that they're not going to vaccinate their children.
And we've got that outbreak of measles in Enfield in North London. And again, we've got
really preventable.
Here's something that people don't talk about in all those articles and everything. One of those, I don't want to do too many London-based stories, and you know, because we are a national show and people get too obsessed with stuff in London. But in Enfield, big measles outbreak, big concern about it. You know where it's happening? It's happening in areas with a high ethnic minority population. Because actually, it's, you've got Southeast, we've got, you know, Indian subcontinent Asians and black people not getting jabs. Not getting jabs for anything. They don't get their kids MMR'd. I mean, again, there's just general mistrust, and that's where you see those jabs. And I'm sorry, not even a shadow of a doubt in my mind, you should get your kid MMR'd. And if you still believe the Andrew Wakefield nonsense about autism, I mean, frankly, you should probably have your kids taken with you because you're too stupid to be a parent. It's a load of made up, it's absolute lies. Andrew Wakefield is a liar. He made up every aspect of that. And again, he should be in prison for that as well. And this is the thing. And then when that turns in, when reasonable suspicion about the governments over their very poor handling of COVID and their requirements on jabs and things, when that turns into anti-vax, people die. Children die of measles. People, you know, then don't, you know, people can die of meningitis, and we need to get things in perspective.
We do, and it's also things like tetanus injections, because the batch of vaccines you give your children include the tetanus vaccine. That is a really horrific disease, and if you're not being protected against it, you shouldn't be outside.
It's really, really terrible. Again, there's people go, oh, people live for years. No, people used to die all the time. Children used to die by the age of 4 routinely. I mean, please get with the programme. You know, this is an important vaccination that people can have against meningitis. Let's go to Carol, who's on the line. She's on 0344 499 1000. And Carol, you're in Cornwall, aren't you? And you've had meningitis.
Yes, the reason I phoned was because the first time that you were talking about the symptoms that you should look out for, you didn't mention the only symptom that I had. And that's why I phoned up, because I thought it was important.
And what was that?
Well, that was a severe headache.
Yeah.
But the guy you had on afterwards, the professor, he mentioned it. So I wouldn't have phoned if I'd waited a little bit longer.
Well, no, I'm glad you did. So you didn't have any of the... People know about you put your glass on the, you know, on if you've got a rat.
None of that. I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And I was, and of course, full of beans, but I started to get very tired. So I was very tired, but I had developed a headache, Julia, that I do not have words to explain how horrific that headache was. And I managed to stagger to the hospital, Hampstead General it was called. I think it's the Royal Free now, and sort of they were poo-hooing it. But then they realised that I couldn't move my neck.
Yeah, as Carl had a good pointed out.
Yeah. But I had put that down, of course, to the severe headache, and then they tested me for my reflexes, and that's what caused the alarm bells to start ringing, because I didn't have any. So all my reflexes were dead. So that's when I got admitted to the hospital, and then I had lumbar punctures. In total, I had quite a few. And, of course, after the first lumbar puncture, it was diagnosed as meningitis.
Yeah. And how long were you in hospital?
For about a month.
A month?
I was there for about a month, but I kept getting relapses, really.
And did you have any of this? And I know a friend of mine who had a teenager who almost died, and the teenager just, I mean, you know, the limbs, and that's the thing, so many people end up losing limbs.
Oh, yes, I know. I was extremely lucky. I think it's because I was probably as tough as old boots.
And you got there early.
Yeah, and I got there early, and so I had no lasting effects, except for a good year afterwards. I would tire more easily, but apart from that, I would also get headaches. and they used to frighten me to death.
I bet they did. That's it. What amazing story. Glad you're here to tell the tale, Carrie. This is a serious disease, but very, very good point in terms of, what you actually need to look out for. What, again, there's a severe headache, the neck stiffness. A lot of people don't get that rash. As my daughter, it was only one that was, a concern, and that was a get to hospital now, paediatrician waiting. I mean, take it seriously. But again, without panicking. This is the thing. Yeah. There's a balance, isn't there? Without panicking. But I mean, certainly, if you're a youngster in the Kent area, you want to be paying attention. And they were saying, medical professionals, if a friend of yours is saying, oh, I'm going to have a lie down, I don't feel well, you need to be watching them and get them to hospital without, a shadow of a doubt if you've got any fears. Let's just get to it. I've got a couple of messages I want to get to about Donald Trump blasting Keir Starmer's terrible leadership. What's your reaction to that? Patrick says the coward has to go. James says, now Trump wants us to pay the bills for his disastrous war. No, thank you. The UK says Kate needs to stand up to dictators like Trump. Well done, Starmer. He's not a dictator. Misha says the US should have been better prepared for this war. I agree with you on that one. They knew what was coming. Now they're dragging their allies into war. We should let the US, Israel and Iran battle it out themselves. Emma says this will be the one and only time and I will ever agree with the traitor Starmer, but he's right. We should stay out of this mess. None of our soldiers should die for America. Jim says, talk about a weasel. Starmer is pathetic. Trump is the problem, says Brian. Well, an awful lot of people saying that. 70% of people in Britain is in a new poll saying that they don't want us to be involved in this war. But are we risking our strategic security long term with America by not joining? Love to hear your thoughts. So 344 499 1000 is the number to call. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch up next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's just approaching 3 minutes past 11. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have your company. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts. Donald Trump has blasted Keir Starmer's terrible leadership over Iran. This is amid fears back home in Britain of fuel rationing for motorists as a result of the crisis. What's your reaction to all of that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged on the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate a message. Coming up, we are going to be talking more about what Donald Trump has had to say. We're also going to be talking about the boss of Britain's wind farm trade body. He's now told Ed Miliband that we need to allow more North Sea drilling. Is there anyone who agrees with Ed Miliband's policies other than apparently Keir Starmer? Well, maybe we'll find out actually from my next guest. Delighted to welcome to the show the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I must ask you first the question I'm putting to our audience today, with Donald Trump criticising Keir Starmer, he says, for terrible leadership. Is that a fair characterisation of our Prime Minister?
So, Julia, you will know that I am Keir Starmer's biggest critic. I think that he is very weak. He doesn't have a plan. He's a hostage to his backbenchers. However, I do disagree with the way that Donald Trump is dealing with Keir Starmer. I think this war of words is very childish. This is the kind of stuff that should be said behind closed doors if he's really unhappy, because we're sending the wrong signal to our opponents like Iran, like Russia. You know, we've got President Zelensky in the UK today. Having the Western alliance in a spat is not what we need to see. But as I said, I am Keir Starmer's biggest critic, but what we want to see in our leaders is dignity. The relationship is not between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. It is between the United Kingdom and the United States. It is a special relationship. It is long-standing. I cannot tell your listeners and your viewers just how much we rely on the US for our security, for our defence. There's a lot that I saw in government, a lot that people don't know. We've got to maintain that relationship for the UK, for NATO, and, to be honest, for stability on the world stage.
Well, indeed, I mean, you've made clear you disagree with Keir Starmer's decision not to allow the US to use the Diego Garcia base for those initial missile attacks on Iran. But is there an argument that, well, we can say, well, you know, Donald Trump said, you know, Europe's our problem. Well, fine, we'll deal with Europe, but this is your problem, Donald Trump. At the end of the day, we don't have the wherewithal, thanks to the hollowing out of our defences over many years, to defend our allies, or indeed our own interests abroad or at home. And we do rely on that security umbrella, not just from NATO, but specifically from the United States. And actually, playing a long game, it would have been wiser to offer that support to Donald Trump, such as we have the military wherewithal to do it. Would that have been a long-term strategic game that you would have played?
Well, I think that what you have touched on is the lack of planning from Keir Starmer. I knew that something was going to happen to Iran because I could see it right back in January when everyone was talking about Greenland. I don't know if you remember, I had this interview with Laura Koonsberg and I said Greenland is a second-order issue. We need to be looking at Iran. Even online, people were seeing ships mobilizing, going to the Middle East. Keir Starmer was asleep at the wheel. You know, we have not been spending enough on defense. Since 1989, defense spending has come down. It only went up in 2022 under Boris Johnson with Ben Wallace as defense secretary. I remember him saying we need to start thinking about what's going on in Ukraine. We were thinking ahead. We were able to send tanks, to send, munitions to Ukraine. We helped them. We helped them because we could see it coming. Keir Starmer didn't see anything coming, so he's been caught, you know, fast asleep, doesn't know what he wants to do, doesn't have any meaningful foreign policy that we can point to about what it is he's trying to achieve. My view is that we've got to be acting in the national interest, and that means thinking ahead. But he was completely unprepared, and worst of all, this happened just after that Gorton by-election. He is a hostage to his backbenchers. He's worried about the hard left and the Green Party and, you know, the people who think that we should be spending more time talking about Gaza than what's going on in our country, and that's why he's in this mess.
Do you think we should be rationing petrol and diesel at this time because of concerns about the Strait of Hormuz not being open, a huge amount of our oil supplies coming from that region?
We need to start drilling our own oil and gas in the North Sea, Julia. We have got oil in this country and we're not drilling it enough because of Ed Miliband's crazy net zero plans. I think even the renewables industry is saying that we need to start getting stuff out of the North Sea. Instead, we're importing from other countries. This is part of the problem, short-term thinking. And then on top of that, Labour are planning to increase fuel duty. We froze it for 14 years. In fact, we even cut it. They want to add 5p on. They are not thinking seriously. This is yet another burden that households and businesses do not need.
OK, no, we've not got much time with you. I just want to ask you finally, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, got a big speech tonight. Apparently she's going to be setting out her vision. Wasn't aware she had a vision. That'll be interesting to hear. However, she's going to say we need closer ties to the EU if we are to start growing again after a long period of basically pretty much no growth whatsoever, very anemic growth when we have had it. Is the answer to closer ties to the EU?
Well, do we even know what she means by that? The EU also has anemic growth. That was one of the reasons why we left. We need to seize the opportunities of being out of the EU. Clearly, all we can see from Labour is going backwards. Of course, we want closer ties with many countries around the world, yes, including those in the EU, but that means also strengthening ourselves. What she's really saying is a slogan, it is not a plan. Closer ties with the EU that has similar problems to us is not going to solve an ageing population, for example. It is not going to solve so many of the things which we are dealing with. I want to see us competing with the EU while being friends with them. They are our allies. We need to work with them, but it sounds to me like Rachel Reeves wants to go back into the EU because she hasn't got any idea what to do with the UK economy. She doesn't know how to get growth. Every single thing she has done in her budget has made life worse for people. She has ruined a lot of businesses. There's some pubs that won't even let her in, hairdressers that won't let her in. She doesn't know what to do, so she's now talking about the EU because she's hoping to refight wars that finished a long time ago. Let's work with the EU, but quite frankly, she needs to start at home fixing the problems we've got here, and let's start by cancelling that stupid fuel duty rise which she's planning to impose on everybody.
I'm just going to be really naughty and ask you one more question. Are you planning to go to a Gale's Bakery anytime soon?
I have already been to a Gale's Bakery. I ordered their food. I think Gale's is a fantastic business. I think it is a disgrace that people are attacking them, this nonsensical intimidation of anything that has to do with Israel and Jewish people in particular. We need to speak out about it, every single one of us who has a voice. We cannot have a situation where people are attacking businesses because they don't like where they think the business is from. We never did that in this country, and it needs to stop. It is not British culture. It is not how we do things here.
Kemi Badenoch, great to speak to you. Hope we get a bit longer next time. Leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, out and about in Surrey, doing a lot of interviews. So we only had a short period of time. Sorry for the background noise, which you can hear. Very much out and about. You can hear a road there. Claire Pearsall, I'm going to come back to everything that we've been talking about in terms of the of Middle East and like, but I just want to explain for those who haven't heard, maybe haven't heard about the Gale's Bakery issue. And this is basically all related to Gale's Bakery. Has been it's a bakery and it's a cafe. It's rather well to do, rather fancy. I've got to be honest with you, and I know the owner, but it's too expensive, mate. It's too expensive. But it's fancy schmancy. Yeah. And they've got various number of bakeries. But it was originally set up by someone, an Israeli baker. I mean, 70, 80 years ago or something, 60, 70 years ago. And there's an extraordinary article that's gone in the Guardian newspaper. Well, of course it's the Guardian, written by, frankly, a horrific human being, as far as I can tell. And basically says, he writes in this, even though Gale's describes itself as a British business with no specific connections to any country or government outside the UK, I'd like to point out they are ultimately owned by an organisation which has worked with Israeli companies. I mean, it's that tenuous, okay? This journalist from The Guardian has written, its very presence 20 metres away from a small independent Palestinian cafe feels quietly symbolic, an act of heavy-handed high street aggression. I absolutely kid you not. Now, the guy who's written this piece, Jonathan Liu, has had an awful lot of criticism, of the Guardian editor and senior people allowing this article in. It's basically an entire article about there's a Palestinian cafe and there's a load of other well-known high street chains that have set up, but the one that set up a few weeks ago is Gale's, and that is unacceptable because basically it was set up by Jews. That's kind of basically the argument. lots of people all over social media saying, oh, just gonna go and get my aggressively, my aggressive Gales, I don't know, chocolate brownie or my cup of latte or whatever. It is extraordinary. This country has got to a place, and America's done this as well. They're completely bonkers as well, where the supposedly lefty types who work for places like The Guardian, and bearing in mind I worked there for over a year, I know what it's really like, and it's as bad and awful as you think it is. That they think that they're the good people by basically criticising a business because a particular it was set up by somebody or is has some the owners have some links with a company that's to do with another country. I mean, I can't even make sense of it on air because it's so mad. Yeah. But this is a blatantly, openly, I would say, anti-Semitic article in a national newspaper, a newspaper that claims to be, on the side of the good and the virtuous.
And you just feel sometimes, because it was a comment piece, and you'll know this from your background in newspapers, comment pieces are always a little bit inflammatory, otherwise nobody ever reads them, to be honest. So I
try and make mine informed. I'm old-fashioned like that.
But I do wonder if that was the whole reason. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic. You're going to blame a bakery that sells actually some really quite nice food.
I'm going to have to go and pay more for a latte now, just on principle.
I know. I wish there was one near to where I live, but there isn't, sadly. And they are nice, but I do think it's had the opposite effect, and everybody's now been running to go and get their croissant or their,
shop at Gales. I mean, shop anywhere. It's like these Israeli-owned restaurants where in central London, which are now you can't get a table out for ages because after they had protests outside, they're doing their work, for them. But it is just extraordinary. The fact that we are into that sort of level of pettiness, and you've got these people. You're writing an article about someone setting up a cafe next to another cafe, basically a bakery, because they've got different generations of owners. I find that mind-blowing. But nothing to say about Iran executing on the street tens of thousands of young people and protesters. I mean, the people who claim to have something to say, nothing about, Hamas in Gaza and what they're doing. They're executing people on the street in Gaza. Not a word to say about that. No. It is extraordinary, the stuff that these so-called good people, choose to comment on. If you've got a problem with someone selling coffee and croissants, you need to take a long, hard look at yourself. You are bonkers in the nut, quite apart from the fact that you're a nasty Jew hater, because that's what it is. It's Jew hating. It's not anti-Zionism. It's anti-Jew. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Would they, if it was any other coffee brands, would they have such an issue with it? No, of course they wouldn't. They wouldn't have even noticed the fact that it's a Jewish-owned baker.
I don't even think the current owner is Jew. That's the thing.
Well, no,
even if he was.
Isn't it now owned by a sort of venture capital firm in the US?
Yes, that's that's the point. But they don't like. They're the big Satan. Genuinely trying to explain this. There's lots of fantastic articles. I put on my social media feed a brilliant piece by Stephen Daisley, The Spectator. I think you could get some Spectator articles for free if you do. So worth reading. It explains it all. It's genuinely hard to explain that story because it's so mad.
Yes, completely bonkers. It was somebody who happened to be Jewish, set it up, made a nice business out of it and then sold it. Well, isn't this the whole dream, that this is how you build an economy, this is how you get on in life?
That's not for the socialists at The Guardian. Genuinely. My leaving email from The Guardian. One of my colleagues said, you have to have a leaving bash. I don't want to have a leaving bash. I'm really done. My leaving email began with the words, I kid you not, after 1 year, 3 months and 2 days, brackets, not that I was counting, I'm leaving. It was there were some nice people. There were some really nice people.
Course,
but in terms of a newspaper, I'm telling you, it's as bad there. It's the only place I've ever worked, genuinely, that I genuinely think there was just routine sexism and racism in terms of who got put on which stories.
Seriously?
The Guardian.
Did they get you a nice gift?
It's an awful place. I didn't want a nice gift. Literally just wanted to leave. Just never darken their door again. But what can I say? Anyway, I digress. Let's talk about what Kemi Badenoch had to say. I mean, again, it's always very difficult. You speak to someone, you're basically an hour after the plan to speak, and she's already spoken to pretty much everybody else. And she's saying a lot of the things, to be fair, she's already said, in terms of, criticism of Donald Trump or Keir Starmer. I think she, like a lot of us, feels like, yeah, we're big critics of Keir Starmer, but, let's not have the American president slagging him off publicly.
Yeah.
And she said this is a war of words and it's childish. That is true. I mean, but to be fair, I hate having to do this. To be fair to the Prime Minister, they're not getting involved in that war of words. I can just imagine David Lammy's going, oh, can I tweet? Can I, please?
Stop.
This is a... Let's face it, the whole thing with the Iran war and our relations with America, what our involvement is, it's a damage limitation exercise, isn't it? That's all it is.
It is, and I was actually really impressed. All right, this is difficult because the Prime Minister, he has made the right choice in that respect, and it's really difficult for me to say so.
No, but not on Diego Garcia.
No, not on that, but if just... slowly not getting involved in a war that isn't ours. I mean, there are a lot of other mistakes, trust me on that, but I do think that Kemi is right to take a really measured tone, and what's impressed me with her recently is that she's not making knee-jerk reactions to things. Listening to her talking to you, it was all thought through, it is very measured.
I mean, you would say that, you're a Tory.
But I've been very, very critical of her. I've been very critical of my entire party over the last 4 years. But I'm starting to see a leader coming through in her. And actually, I think her response to this has been impressive.
OK. I mean, in terms of what if you come the revolution, you and I are in charge.
Yay.
I mean, I would certainly have allowed the use of the Diego Garcia base. This nonsense of it wasn't self-defence. But it is self-defence. Iran has declared war on America. Death to America. Pretty sure that's a declaration of war. And the terror threats. And I consider Israel to be an absolute crucial ally. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And frankly, I've got very little sympathy for the people fleeing, Dubai and places like that right now, and going, oh no, it's all terrible. Oh, you're not allowed to speak freely about how fearful you are because you get put in prison for 5 years. Oh no, that's because you've been living in a nasty, despotic state where you have no freedoms. You just got the illusion because you get to live in a pretty apartment. I'm sorry, and pay no tax. I've got very little sympathy for those. I want them to be safe. But come back and pay your taxes, and and I mean that to every. I'm sorry, I do feel very strongly about that. Don't expect the British government to help you if you've decided to sod off.
Yes.
And pay taxes. Well, fine, off you go. Fine. Fill your boots, but don't expect us to pick up the pieces when it all goes wrong. That's kind of where I am on that one. But 70% of the British public say they're opposed to us getting involved in this Iran war. But the reality is we are involved. Iran has bombed a military base of ours. Iran does consider us to be, along with Israel, another little Satan. They do consider us to be a part of the problem for them. They would happily blow us up if they could. That's what the Iranian leadership would want to do. They are, basically stopping tankers getting out of the Strait of Hormuz. The Americans, they're self-sufficient in their energy. They don't need oil from the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, they've got the ability to to get out what they need and or to pay for whatever they need. We don't. We are going to be reliant on that. Let's talk about speed, lower speed limits. As if you, literally, let's just walking speed limit. It's going to go the same as when you had a horse and cart to 100 years ago. Speed limits under emergency plans to cope with the fuel crisis. Rationing of petrol and diesel is a possibility. Who knows what's going to happen? We could have food shortages again because the cost of tankers going around the Horn of Africa, and all of that. There are going to be massive extra impacts, and we saw what happened during lockdown. This could be happening again. We are involved. We will be feeling the impact of this.
But when you actually speak to people and say, do you think that we should be sending troops? Do you think we should be getting more actively involved? And the majority of people now say no. And I think quite a lot of us will remember what happened over Iraq and the decisions that were made there based on absolute nonsense.
I'm sorry, again, I think that dossier was a lie, but at the end of the day,
it was.
We knew that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction because we had sold them to him. But he used them against Iran.
But the premise of going to war and suggesting to the public that you had all this dossier of information, which was completely incorrect. I think people remember that. People also remember the 20
lack of planning.
The 20 odd years we spent in Afghanistan. For what? look at what's happened, how many people we lost.
But we're not talking about regime change in Iran. Iraq and Afghanistan are basically backward sort of medieval, certainly Afghanistan, medieval societies. Iran isn't. It's 70% secular. It's a very sophisticated, well-educated and very, would have been otherwise, very wealthy country. There is, we're not talking... Donald Trump's been very clear. It's time for the Iranian people can rise up, but his regime change is not the aim.
So he says, but previously it was the aim. And you sort of think, did he mean regime change or a change in regime, which is what we've ended up with. We've ended up with somebody who is very similar to the previous one, but actually even worse. So this is the younger.
Well, if he's even alive still, or
well, there's no proof to say that he is there? So I think that it was a mess going into it. There were no clear strategies as to why Trump wanted to do this and what he wants to achieve. And I think that is what people are saying, don't get involved.
All right, Right, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you on all of this? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged to the national rate. Text costs £1 standard network rate. Message costs posts on X are free. Now, we are giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday, the 5th of July, with the full Racing Green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock. Listen up to find out how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Yep, it is the perfect Silverstone race day experience for any F1 fan, so do not miss out. We'll take a quick break and we'll come to your calls. This is Talk.
We are here to support our people of Palestine, of course, and Iran. It's pretty clear and evident. And the massacre of 165 girls. But our blood is considered cheap, but it's not. It's just as equal. Humans are all equal.
What about the bombing of the Ayatollah? What did you think of that?
He was destined for that. That was his destiny, and he fulfilled his dream. He died for the cause of his belief.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed, this is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:27 is the time. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Carl is on the line. He's in Liverpool. Hello, Carl. What do you want to say?
Hi, good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think you were talking earlier about Keir Starmer, Donald Trump criticising Keir Starmer, but mostly not criticising any other European country like Germany. I think he's making a point of pointing out Keir Starmer because we are their oldest ally and we've been there through thick and thin.
Yeah.
Maybe he's pointing them out to say, well, you should step forward being our oldest ally. But what it's doing is making Keir Starmer look even worse on the world stage because we should, to a point, be involved. We sent the ship late. I don't even think that's there yet. If it goes to boots on the ground, then do we get involved in that way? But
I don't think there are going to be boots on the ground. Maybe Carg Island for US Marines and that's it.
Yeah, possibly. But I think it all comes down to, for me, the Muslim vote. He's so scared of upsetting the Muslim community within our country. That's all it boils down to, is hesitation. But also, we don't have the ships. We don't have anything to send because we are so light.
Yeah. At the end of that's the thing. At the end of the day, what help realistically can we be? Apparently, we've got these minesweepers. We have this base in Bahrain, which did have minesweepers, and then we sent that back to port in Britain. I mean, even at the point when the Americans were sending all their their battleships over, their aircraft carriers to the Middle East, it's quite extraordinary. That said, major failure on the US part. They seem to be a bit surprised that the Iranians are trying to close down, or have closed down to all intents and purposes, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, I would have thought that this is the sort of thing that military strategists could have pointed out on day one.
Yeah, of course. I think Donald Trump said a while ago that if America ever needed the UN, he doesn't think they'd help, and I think he was quite right in saying that they don't look like they want to get involved in any way.
Well, NATO. I mean, there is the argument. I can't remember which world leader who pointed it out that I think it was the German Chancellor that it was Merz that pointed out that NATO wasn't formed for a war against Iran. NATO is a defensive organisation, and it only got involved with Afghanistan because that was a strike on one of the members back on 9/11.
Yeah, of course. So, Joe, can I just point something out about Afghanistan as well, Julie? Because Keir Starmer said, he was dead against Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff, but he worked for free to sue veterans.
He did what?
He worked for free to sue veterans.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. Lawyer.
With Phil Shiner
Yeah, I just find it absolutely disgusting that he would even mention that, given what he did for free. This is why we need him out, because he doesn't have our interests at heart. He hasn't got our back. He's not interested in our concerns right now. Yes, there's a war. Should we be involved? Maybe to a certain point, but he's not coming out as a strong leader out of this, and this is where we as British people need him to listen to us.
Yep, very, very good point. Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you for that. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew. Andrew, can you hear me, my love? Oh, I'm not sure we can. Oh, sorry, apologies. Lewis. Lewis is on the line. Hello, Lewis.
It's Louis. Sorry, hello.
Louis, thank you.
That's all right, no worries. So I'm just ringing from Basel saying that I think we need to cast our eye back to 60 years ago when the Vietnam War started. And there was a parallel between how Harold Wilson reacted to Lyndon Baines Johnson's input when they were invading Vietnam. And it was the kind of pragmatism that avoided us getting caught in that stalemate that in the long term has been seen as a disaster for both American politics and global politics. And I think that I'm not the biggest fan of Keir Starmer, but I think that he has done the right thing in the sense of keeping us out of it.
But there's not a direct parallel, because Vietnam, and again, this was about, fighting between South and North Vietnam. This was about, two global powers, Russia and America. That was a separate thing, wasn't it? But Iran has threatened Britain. Iran has struck one of our bases in Cyprus. Iran has threatened us. Some 20 attempted terror attacks. They've been fueling terror attacks on our streets for years. That's a very different issue.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm not saying that it's so much on the boots on the ground and with the actions of each individual state. I'm more sort of talking about the relationship between the president and the prime minister, seeing how this special relationship has come under similar fire before.
Yeah.
And, and if you're looking at what happened 20 years ago with Blair completely going on board with Bush and ending up dragging us into Iraq and Afghanistan, which led to loss of many of our British servicemen.
Most of the Western world joined in Afghanistan.
That is true. That is absolutely true. And but do we learn the lesson from what happened in the past, or do we?
Well, what's the lesson from Syria? Didn't get involved then. How's that worked out?
Exactly. There's no that has worked out. Well, it's said that we did get rid of Assad, but I think that we're looking at the fact that Iran is a much bigger power than Syria. Yeah. It has got the weapons, and without saying trying not to contradict myself, I can see where where Trump is trying to go. But I think that the problem that they're having is of course trying to get the other NATO members on board. Yeah. And the fact is that NATO is much more fraught than it was. Perhaps,
oh, goodness me, absolutely. Louis, great call. Thank you very much, Louis in Barnstaple there. I have to point out again, where was America when the Argentines invaded Falklands? Just saying. Anyway, 11:33 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts. I think this is quite a difficult one. I don't think this is one of those clear-cut issues at all. I always try and make a decision based on having seen both sides, but I can really see why one would argue in one case and the other. Give us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. As I keep pointing out, though, people say it's nothing to do with us, but we have to start rationing petrol and diesel because of the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe it will have something to do with us, eh? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get in touch. Up next, going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to former Royal Navy Commander Tom Sharp, OB, about what he thinks. Also going to be live in the studio in the next half hour, Donica McCarthy, Director of Climate Media Coalition, about how even the boss of Britain's wind farm trade body is now telling Miliband he needs to allow more drilling in the North Sea. If even he's saying it, maybe we should be doing it. We'll talk about that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Let's stick with what's going on in Iran. Indeed, criticisms of the American president of our Prime Minister Keir Starmer, calling him a terrible leader over Iran, amid fears of fuel rationing for motorists as a result of that blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by the Iranians, well, actually with mines. Let's talk about all this now with former Royal Navy Commander Tom Sharp, OBE, who joins us. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Do you agree with the American president about the terrible leadership on this issue of our Prime Minister Keir Starmer?
To an extent, I'm afraid I do. I mean, I don't agree with the manner in which he's doing it, and the sort of flip-flopping over the last few weeks, saying we're all idiots, and then can you help, and now we're idiots again. Yeah. Clearly that is having an effect on not just us but everyone's decision making here. But we have been indecisive. We've been slow. Navies historically sail towards the sound of gunfire. We should be doing all we can. We should have done it earlier. You can always get there and hold back, but you can't help if you're not there. And I think our Navy is so thin, we've become a little squeamish about using it out of turn and out of order, and here we are.
Well, indeed, it is extraordinary that while we had this huge flotilla from the Americans heading towards the Middle East, and lots of people talking about preparations for some sort of action, that our Navy contingent in the area was taken away. I mean, it does seem an extraordinary lack of strategic planning by our... I mean, I don't know, would that have been the military leadership? But would it be in the naval leadership? Would it have been a political leadership making that decision?
It's two things that have converged here. They're two quite separate things. One of them is a 30-year decline in our armed services. I mean, that is ubiquitous across the whole piece of defence. We've prioritised elsewhere for 30 years. And those chickens were going to come home to roost at some point. And it was never going to be at a moment of our choosing. Yeah. And that's what's happening now. So the withdrawal of the mine hunters from the Gulf was 10 years in the planning. The theory was we were going to have a remotely operated replacement ready in time. But classically, and this happens every time, it's not ready in time. It's not ready. And neither is the American. So we've got a real mine clearance problem here. And then the second part of this problem was the one we touched on before, our operational decision making. So between the Navy offering options and saying this is what we've got 5 things we can do, and we can talk through those, but there's 5 things we can do, between that moment and the decision, both before the strike started and as they were happening, and then when Akrotiri got hit, I think we've been sluggish, and I think that decision making process has been exposed, and so when Trump has a go at it, he has a point. Yeah, indeed. But then do we not also have a point? European leaders, pretty much to a man and woman, are saying, this is kind of your issue. You started this particular military campaign. I mean, I would say it is defensive, actually, because I do think Iran has started the war itself. But the military campaign was started by the Americans. I find it extraordinary that they do not appear to have done any strategic planning for the likelihood of the mining or blockading or some sort of action to close the Strait of Hormuz, which is vital for 20% of the world's diesel and oil, gas and oil. It does appear that this has come as a complete surprise to the Americans. How is that even possible? Yeah, it isn't a surprise insofar as I was part of the planning team way back when that ran the plan for this, and it's lever arch files that thick of extreme levels of detail for all of this, all the sequencing. We war gamed it, we practiced it. But similar to the UK, where I described a breakdown in communications between the Navy and the decision makers, we're seeing the same in Washington. We're seeing CENTCOM, which is their equivalent of our joint headquarters, to the Pentagon, to the White House, and then there's Fifth Fleet, which is the American cadre out in the Gulf. Somewhere in there, someone hasn't read the plan and is being surprised by the sequence of events. And Fifth Fleet were barely out of their headquarters when the first strike happened in Bahrain. So there's a lot of this that's surprising a lot of commanders who are now having to retro-fill this plan into the White House and go, these are your options, and some of them are not good ones. No, indeed. There's some talk now. I mean, we've seen the bombing of Karg Island, which is very significant for oil exports from Iran, and talk of the Marines being on their way, but apparently it will take the best part of a couple of weeks to get all their equipment to possibly seize Karg Island. I mean, that would be a different level of issue, wouldn't it? Now, 70% of the British public have said in polls that they do not support Britain getting involved in the Iran war. However, we kind of get dragged into these things anyway, because we have been historically one of America's closest allies. It does seem that, unless we're just not having it reported, that Donald Trump's criticism of world leaders pretty much seems to be very much focused on Keir Starmer and not other European and other world leaders who've not got involved in this, but also the possibility that this is going to impact our economy, and we're not doing well as it is. Do you think at that point there is a likelihood we would get more involved, simply because if we can't get access to reasonably priced oil and gas, we will have no choice? I'm pretty forward-leaning on this one, maybe as you'd expect as an ex-Navy guy. We're involved. We're in this fight. That to me is very clear. Whether we agree with the way it was started, whether we agree with the people who are running it, is irrelevant, really, in terms of what this means to us, sort of strategically. We're involved. And we should react accordingly, and that, as I say, means forward basing ships. But we've got an exercise in the High North later this month and early next month, and we're looking at the geostrategy of that and going, well, that's our priority. I agree, but it still will be when this is finished. But this is right now, and it's raining today. Yeah. And we should be getting our ships out of the door.
I mean, military exercises should not take priority over a military crisis.
It's not. I mean, the High North work isn't strictly speaking an exercise. It's partly to do with Putin's navy, and it's very vital. You know, the High North is of strategic interest to this country, but because we've got so few assets, we're constantly backed into this corner where we have to decide. Right, and it's the same with our destroyer, who's just in Gibraltar now. She's been sent to go to the Mediterranean to protect Cyprus. But what's more important now, the protection of our base there, or this geostrategic threat that's brewing in the Strait of Hormuz, and our planners are constantly being backed into this corner through lack of resources. It's
because
very
we're having
frustrating.
to choose. I mean, this is the thing. There's a lot of talk about, you know, we think Donald Trump made it really clear. He said, you know, Ukraine's your problem, Europe. You know, we've been subsidising NATO. More than 50% of the entire NATO budget and military far more actually military capability comes from America than from Europe and other NATO members. And you know, we've been looking after you. No, this is your sphere, not ours. You look after Ukraine. And in making that argument, it's not unreasonable for European members of NATO to say, well, fine, well, then Iran is your problem. But the reality is, you say, we are in this. We're going to be far more impacted by restrictions on oil and gas supplies in America, which is more self-sufficient, way more than we are. Is there an argument where it may not be in our short-term interest, we may not have much of a capability, but actually getting involved in this war, being a good, close, loyal ally to the US, would have been, in our long-term strategic interests, a better choice to have made, because at the end of the day, we live under that NATO umbrella. It is an umbrella in terms of safety for us that isn't pretty much entirely down to the US. And if we want to stay able to protect ourselves from Russia or Iran or any other threat, we need America a heck of a lot more than they need us.
100%. Freedom of navigation is in the US Navy's DNA. Thank goodness. You know, the Red Sea was another example where they didn't really need to get involved in that, and they did, and thank goodness, because they are literally the only ones with that capability. So we do need to be grateful for that and sort of tip our caps to it. But in terms of getting involved, we are. You know, this is on our doorstep. This is not an over there problem. This is affecting prices in the UK today. We're flying fast jets, F-35s out of Akrotiri in defensive missions on the mainland. We're flying Typhoons out of Qatar. We're steaming a destroyer east across the Mediterranean. We're steaming a nuclear-powered attack submarine up from Australia. We're spinning up our contingency ship Lyme Bay, and we're looking at mine countermeasures. We're involved. We're in. But we've just seemed to have chosen the worst of both worlds, where we're in, and somehow managing to communicate that we're not. So we're angering the person who, we shouldn't anger, and yet we've done it wrong both ways.
We've got no benefit from either. Well, again, this is a shilly-shallying, indecisive. Did the Prime Minister decide on it? No, he kind of just tried to be both ways. Can I ask you, I mean, one of the biggest fears, of course, is you can start a war, you can have clear war aims. Well, the war aims do not include things like regime change. We've seen where that has gone wrong, and the nation building, the Iraq and Afghanistan, that has, singularly failed in both of those countries. And maybe that's something that the West will have gone, you know what, not our issue anymore. We just don't want a country to be out there that is a threat to us or its neighbours, in the case of, say, Iran or Afghanistan, harbouring al-Qaeda and the like. But where do you think this ends? How do you think this ends? When do you think this ends?
Yeah, I mean, but all really hard questions to answer. From a military perspective, it's very hard to know what state their threat is at. So take the Strait of Hormuz. There's three ways that it ends there. One is that Iran decides to stop for diplomatic reasons, political reasons, or runs out of bombs and bullets. Second is that it's told to stop. Let's assume by China. And they get fed up and go, all right, that's enough now. Or the third is they're made to stop. And that, of course, is the one that I always focus on as a military guide. But actually, it's inevitably the least good of the three options. So at some point, I mean, the end states, as far as we can determine out of the US, the striking down of their navy, which was always irrelevant, by the way, their regular navy was never a feature here. The taking down of the ballistic missile threat, that's very important, but not yet done. The nuclear bit that we obliterated last year needs to be obliterated again, it seems. We're heading towards those. The regime one is the clincher. And I can see an off-ramp here where, and you hear it in Trump's language occasionally, where he starts creating the conditions for an off-ramp. So you force open the strait under heavy air cover, all the warships in, you get a blob of vessels in and a blob out, and you call it safe. You say, we've done this, we've done the things we set out to achieve, we've made the strait safe, victory. Another war I ended, and there's this sort, and of course nothing has changed, and Iran retains its special status as the single point of malfeasance in the entire region. I can really see an unsatisfactory solution brewing in that.
We shall wait and see. Tom Sharp, pleasure to speak to you, sir. Tom Sharp, OBU, former Royal Navy commander there. Claire Pearsall, nice to hear someone speaking with such clarity.
It really is, and I think the really important point there is how few assets we have as a nation available to support any of our allies, but also to look after ourselves.
Yeah, it was in Kemi Badon, former Tory, now Tory leader, criticising former Tory governments about that. But again, at the end of the day, this happened under the Tories. Yeah, although I think it would have happened under a Labour government or any other government in the same period, given the spending constraints post the economic crisis. 11:48 is time. We're going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts on what you had to say. 0344 499 1000. Next up in the studio, Donica McCarthy, who thinks absolutely even the boss of Britain's wind farm trade body is wrong when he says, yes, Ed Miliband, we need to be drilling more in the North Sea. That's up next. This is Talk.
Do you think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:51 is at the time. Now, these conversations always start off nice. We're going to try and keep it nice. Donica McCarthy, Director of Climate Media Coalition, is joined us in the studio. Very good morning to you, Donica.
Good morning, Julie.
Claire Pearsall is also still here. Now, this is fascinating. Lots of criticism of Ed Miliband. I mean, that goes without saying on my show. Even in my personal life, Ed Miliband, taking us back to the medieval caves, one wind turbine and one solar panel at a time secretary. I believe that is his correct job title. He's getting a lot of criticism from people saying we need to be drilling more in the North Sea. Reform have said that. The Tories have now said that. Ed Miliband, of course, has banned any new drilling, any new exploration of the oil and gas availability in the North Sea, even though we're now importing it from Norway, where they're basically drilling right next door to where we're allowed to drill. Now, even the chief executive of Renewable UK, it's the wind farm trade body, the least big oil company you could imagine in the world, Tara Singh. She has said that the crisis in the Middle East demonstrates how vulnerable Britain is to energy price shocks, and she says that we should be allowing more North Sea drilling to boost homegrown energy. If even the wind farm lady is saying this, Donica, we should be doing it, right?
Well, the wind farm lady is actually a former Shell lobbyist.
Oh, well,
and
big oil.
And big oil is actually on the board of renewables. Equinor is on the board. But she's absolutely right. Britain is being hammered yet again by an oil crisis. I'm old enough, I'm 67 years old. I have lived through an oil crisis every 10 years. And the single lesson out of that is we need to get ourselves off the addiction of oil. Do you know?
We need to be self-sufficient in oil. That's the answer to that.
Okay, look at America. America is self-sufficient in oil. What's happening in the current crisis? It's an exporter of oil. The drivers are being hammered. People who are dependent on oil are being hammered.
That we're going to
They're being hammered exactly because we haven't switched fast enough.
Okay, right.
So what we need to do, Britain, the cost of the last oil crisis, Russia, was £100 billion to the UK economy. The Climate Change Committee has estimated that the cost of investment for net zero by 2050 is the exact same amount. So
those estimates are a complete load of abject nonsense, and it's actually way more than that. Here's the thing. You can say, well, the answer to that, and this is something Ed Miliband says as well. I mean, it's almost like having him in the studio. I'm sure you can eat a bacon sandwich much better. But the argument that, we're not self-sufficient in oil and gas. He says we're beholden to despots and to tyrants and petrostates. Yeah. But the answer is there is nobody remotely sensible who knows anything about energy who doesn't think that we are going to be reliant on fossil fuels for the majority of our energy needs for the next few decades at the very, very least. But why do you and Ed Miliband apparently think anything different, and what do you base that on?
Because basically what we're saying is when you're investing billions of pounds on behalf of this country, we should be investing in energy that's cheaper and more reliable and not susceptible
to international... It's not cheaper and it's not more reliable.
Do you accept that in an oil crisis we are hammered because of the cost of fossil fuels? Do you accept in an oil crisis...
I accept because we haven't invested in our own ability to get fossil fuels.
If we have our own fossil fuels, 80% of them are exported.
But they don't have to be in a crisis.
Because we don't have refineries, and do you want to privatise? Do you want to nationalise?
No, I don't want to nationalise. However, as we see in crises, the countries can prioritise their own needs.
That is the only way that if you want to get costs down, you have to nationalise
at no point in the next 20 years or in the next 24 years by 2050 are we going to have every single vehicle on the roads, every train, every factory, every shop, every single heating in every home going to be run not on fossil fuels. So this is a load of nonsense.
No.
We're going to. You can't build concrete. You can't build steel. You can't build lots of things without fossil fuels.
Your argument is an argument from the 1960s that wants to keep us addicted to an oil economy that is actually threatening Britain's national security. The current crisis...
our lack of availability of oil is threatening our economy.
No, if we have, no matter how much oil we have in Britain, we still pay global prices for it.
No, but we hear this argument all the time, the same about gas as well, except the Americans have far lower energy prices than we have, because they've fracked and they've drilled.
America has a separate gas economy than Britain. Britain is part of the European gas markets. If we actually drill for more gas, and anyway, our gas and oil fields peaked when? 1999. It's an old, mature field. What we should be investing in...
fracking hasn't peaked. We haven't tried that.
There's 1.7 million households who are still on oil. After 50 years after the oil crisis, who are going to be hammered on electricity because we didn't switch them to electricity and so, like I have my house. I do not worry about oil crisis because my electricity is free.
But you should,
day and night with a bat, and I want that for everybody.
When you buy, unless you're growing, unless you live a good life and you're growing all your own food.
I'm in Camberwell.
I hate to
tell you. In a city.
Okay. The food that gets to Camberwell and in a city comes via lorry, comes via rail, comes from overseas. That is all by diesel, oil, by petrol. That is required. It is using fertiliser that relies on fossil fuels. That's how we manage to feed a population of 7-8 billion on the planet and not just a few hundred million. All of these things, if you go to hospital and you need medical treatment, it's using plastics that are reliant on fossil fuels. We need, want and rely on fossil fuels.
Julia, You are arguing to keep us addicted to
the thing that keeps us alive. Yes.
To a fuel that has hammered Britain every 10 years, every time there's a crisis in the Middle East. And I'm arguing for national security. We need an inflation-proof energy system that my house has, and then Miliband is advocating.
You want wind turbines and solar panels that are made in China, a hostile nation that could switch them off at any time.
I'm talking about inflation-proof energy.
How?
Two things.
How do we do that?
Okay,
you've got 1 minute.
Buy a foreign gas plant. You have to buy fuel for the next 50 years. Buy a foreign wind turbine or solar panel. You don't have to buy any fuel.
Mate, they last 12 years, max.
They last 25 years.
That's not true.
That is simply mine for 18 years.
No, wind turbines do not last 25 years.
Solar panels last at least 25
years. Well, good for solar panels, but wind turbines do not.
And that's what I want for every house in Britain.
It's sunny outside right now.
Free energy for British households.
As long as we're only invaded on a sunny sun of a summer's afternoon, we'll be fine, won't we? We won't have to rely on reliable energy.
In night time in Camberwell, for the last 10 months, my house has used a battery to use solar power to power my house.
Mate, that's fine for your own electricity. That's absolutely fine. However, that is not how the whole economy runs.
40% of the electricity grid is already renewables. Only 28% is fossil fuels.
No. Sorry, that's roughly about 5% of our entire energy needs is actually from renewables.
Would you accept the national grid? 40% of it is renewables.
Not on most days. Not on all days.
40%.
On the days when it's sunny and windy. Otherwise we rely on gas and nuclear.
Otherwise, like in my house,
we have to have backup.
We use
batteries. You don't need backup for gas and oil and nuclear because they work every day.
Yeah, but you have to buy them every day. You want a system that wants us to buy.
I'm going to liken your argument is Donica. You want to wean us off our addiction to oxygen. I'm afraid fossil fuels are as important to our survival as oxygen. It's as simple as that. It's not going to happen. The fact that you and Ed Miliband, with all due respect, you're as bonkers as each other, would rather put us back in caves, unable to defend our country, unable to feed our population, keep our houses warm and keep cars on the road, rather than actually doing the sensible thing and face facts. Bloody terrifying. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. If you've just tuned in, you just missed a belter of the last couple of hours. I think you would rather enjoy my conversation with Donna McCarthy. I really like Donica. I just genuinely like Ed Miliband. I think he's stark staring insane. I think there are an awful lot of people on the Green side who just are, I mean, certifiably so. Is that you think that, oh, I've got solar panels on my home in Camberwell, therefore we absolutely don't need to have fossil fuels. This is just mad. It's just not based on the facts, but what can you do? Anyway, loads more to come. I'd love to hear your reactions to that phone call, that's on that interview. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Also asking you to get in touch about Donald Trump blasting Keir Starmer's terrible leadership, he says, over Iran. This is amid fears of fuel rationing here for motorists as a result of the crisis. What else could be happening? Or are we, basically, kind of involved in this war anyway, whether we like it or not? What's your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls to charge at the national rate all together now. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Now, don't forget you can go to my YouTube page if you've missed anything at all on the show. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show is what we've cunningly called it, so you can find it easily. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Other topics we're going to get to in the next hour include the dozens of police officers who've been caught shirking at home when they should have been policing our streets. It's bad enough having, social workers and people pretending to work in local council offices at home, or even, radio producers, who knows, working from home and when they're not actually really getting anything done. But now we've got police officers doing that as well. Also, the Green Party, them again, they're set to vote on a motion opposing the NHS's anti-Semitism crackdown. Yeah, because obviously they think it's a really good thing that doctors and nurses should be openly promoting their anti-Semitic views on the wards. Pro-Palestinian badges and the like. I don't feel the need to wear any political badges to work, do you? But there we are. We'll talk about all of that. Delighted to say Claire Pearsall is still joining me, former Conservative government advisor. Do just, before we go to my next guest, who's very kindly waiting, do give us your thoughts on what Donica McCarthy had to say. This after the woman who runs the wind farm industry body, apparently ex-Big Oil. Yeah. Everyone's ex-Big Oil. By the way, Big Oil, if you, like the Israeli government, and who else is supposed to be funding me? But any of you, if you would like to be sending me large cheques, I'm absolutely willing to open a Swiss bank account and to accept those cheques. Do feel free at any point. But I've yet to have any of them. I keep being accused of them, but I haven't had any of them, which, I mean, you think Big Lipstick by now would have got in touch, wouldn't you?
You would.
You'd think, but no. Claire Pearsall, I mean, the boss of the wind farm body is saying, yeah, we need to be drilling in the North Sea to getting more oil and gas out.
Yeah, because that's the sensible option that we have open to us. We aren't exploiting our own reserves well enough. We are looking at madcap schemes. Ed Miliband wants to put massive solar farms across great swathes of countryside.
Of agricultural land.
Of agricultural lands. And there's one...
I hate driving past them on the motorway.
Planned near me, which has got great opposition from my village, and we would lose the most amazing piece of agricultural land. And all they've said is, oh yeah, the cows and sheep, we'll find them somewhere else. And you're like, but they've got somewhere.
They could go Donica's place and stand on his solar panels.
I'm sure they could. But
it is extraordinary. But again, this is, the idea that solar panels and wind turbines are going to power us in the 21st century is literally laughable. And yet we've got a government minister in Ed Miliband who actually thinks that. And again, these people are talking about electricity. Yeah. That's 20% of our needs, and fossil fuels aren't even providing half of that on your average day.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It's literally insane. It doesn't work. The numbers simply don't add up. Anyone who knows anything about it knows this. And yet we've got people who are in charge of running energy policy in this country who are able to say this stuff.
It's almost as if they've never seen the weather in the United Kingdom. That they think that solar is the
But even if it was perfect weather all the time, you still can't make concrete out of solar power electricity.
No, you can't.
But here's the thing: why are we importing loads of our oil and gas from Norway if apparently the North Sea oil and gas fields are completely depleted and have run? What? How come Norway's still exporting if there's so much?
Because they don't like to admit that there is more oil out there.
Genuinely terrifying.
And the fact is that we're not exploiting it. So it's there and it's available, and we own some of those fields, so therefore we should be having it. But
and you don't have to nationalise it to benefit from it, because we get the tax benefit from it. And as we saw in lockdown, in a crisis, you know what? You keep your natural resources when you need to in a moment of crisis.
Absolutely.
That's what you do.
But then you can also sell it and you can exploit that way, so you can still earn money out of it.
And
so
you
it's
decide
not
who you sell it to
difficult
as well.
Absolutely. So you can be choosy about it.
Why aren't we in charge?
We should be.
Right, let's go to my next guest. He was probably very relieved that we're not in charge. He's Rear Admiral Mike Hewitt. He's former Pentagon official, former US Navy officer as well. And I'm delighted to say joins us on the show. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
Let's go back to Donald Trump. We talked about him we talk about him an awful lot every day, when he's in power, when he's not in power, but particularly when he's in power. And he's openly, basically, blasting our own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for his terrible leadership over Iran. He says he's not happy with his policies on Iran, failing to get involved, of course, didn't provide the Diego Garcia base to the Americans for those initial strikes. Do you think that the Donald Trump is correct about Keir Starmer's leadership? Is it terrible?
I wouldn't say he's terrible at leadership, but I think he is indicative of a 30-year decline in UK maritime power and foreign presence. And I think some of his haphazard decision-making has to do with the fact that he probably can't do much to support the U.S. efforts in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so he hides behind a veil of foreign policy or collective discussions or diplomacy. That's not statecraft that's going to work in this environment. And I think to your earlier segment, we all live on energy sovereignty. And if the Straits of Hormuz are not important to the UK, where all the oil comes from, then you will have to subsidize the citizens. And so what is the decision making of the Prime Minister right now? He refused to let us use Diego Garcia in the opening days of the war. How hard was it to let us use those bases? It wasn't hard at all. And then, of course, the HMS Dragon debacle of getting underway haphazardly and probably unsafely to defend your sovereign area in Cyprus. Yeah. These are all indicative of, I think, a lack of strategic clarity at Downing Street.
Yes, certainly. And again, we could have perhaps got the brownie points of the Diego Garcia beast being allowed and talking a lot of support for Donald Trump, whilst quietly saying behind the scenes, we're talking it, but actually you don't really need our help and we haven't got much help to offer. Do you think that, it's a point we put to a previous guest, a former British a military man, I'd love to hear from your point of view as an American. We've got this NATO umbrella of support from, not just European and American members, Canada and others, but that actually, whether we don't want to be involved in the Iran war, whether there's for the domestic reasons back here and the practicalities, we don't have much to offer by way of helping America in that area. But also there's an element where we should be looking at our long-term strategic interests, and they very much are tied to having that American security over us, which we rely on.
I mean, President Trump in his first term got NATO to go to 5% of its GDP, thankfully.
Well, no one's actually hit that. I think maybe the Poles and the Lithuanians.
There's a couple, but at least we've set the bar that we need to get to a higher percentage of GDP, thankfully so. But even with that, the UK has fallen further and further behind in its ability to project power, to protect your own sovereign interest. And again, this isn't about supporting the war in Iran. This is about opening the free flow of oil and commerce in the most important straits in the world. Yeah. That is completely different. This is international waters. These are peaceful vessels being attacked by a belligerent nation. And that's precisely why the UK should be able to disentangle itself from the NATO defensive mission umbrella and support the U.S. in its global national interest.
But what about, look, we do have the history as a naval power very different from countries like Germany. We had the Commonwealth, we had the Empire. So this is stuff that we've naturally done over the years. And America basically sort of took over our naval role in keeping free passage on the seas when American power grew. But why is Donald Trump focusing so much on Keir Starmer as opposed to Friedrich Merz of Germany basically came out and went, no, we're not going to help. Macron talks a good game, and it's basically shoring him, trying to shore himself up. Numerous other European allies in NATO and Australia and others have gone, no thanks, don't want to help. But he seems to be, for want of a better expression, picking on Keir Starmer. Why is that?
I think partially was the Diego Garcia decision, because that had operational impact on our troops in the first days of the war. So that obviously didn't go over well with the president. But also, I think he holds the UK in a different role with an alliance to America over Germany, France, the other NATO nations. I mean, we do believe in the special relationship. We also believe in what we call the Five Eyes, which is the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and America. These are special security relationships that transcend bilaterals or NATO. So I think in some ways he's somewhat angered by the haphazard decision-making of Starmer and not supporting him in an effort that we all agreed Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So you go back to, okay, we've been saying this for years, but then now we have to do something about it. And that's not when you cower. So I believe Trump is picking on the prime minister because he wants the prime minister to be his ally, his closest ally in these types of things, and he hasn't seen it.
What about the lack of strategic planning by the White House and by the Pentagon? By all accounts, this attack on Ayatollah Khamenei, which took out a huge number of senior officials and may have wounded the current Ayatollah as well, perhaps even fatally, some might say. That attack happened. It was just a moment of, of information which was got out of the country that all of these leaders were going to be capable of being attacked, and perhaps everything was launched a bit early. But there does seem to be a complete lack of strategic planning about the risk of the Strait of Hormuz basically being closed by the Iranians. We know they've had that power. They've threatened to use it before. They have used it before. Why was this not thought about by strategic planners in the White House and in the Pentagon?
Well, I can guarantee you they've thought about this contingency.
Did anyone mention it to Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth?
Well, I mean, yes. If I love how they claim Trump is a transactional decision maker, when in fact you can go back 25 years and listen to his comments on Iran, his comments on tariffs, his comments on creating new alliances in the Middle East, not tied to terrorism or oil, but tied to economic growth and economic entanglement. And remember, he offered the Iranians a grand bargain that we would build your nuclear program for free, give you the fuel you need, bring you into the world community. And the mullahs rejected that for only one reason, to have this vague notion of a weapons program that was getting closer and closer to reality. So the decision to go on that fateful day was based on taking out the head of the snake and the regime leadership. And I think it was to great effect. Their army or their Navy and Air Force is decimated. What they're doing in the Straits right now will not last very long with drones and unmanned vessels. What we need to do, and what the president is urging the world community to help him with, is safe passage of tankers and other commerce. This is not about joining the war. Those are two distinctly different things.
Do you think, again, like the other European leaders, again, they're the ones, I mean, most of Europe, we're the ones who are reliant on that oil getting out of the Middle East, not the Americans. And there's an element where Donald Trump could go, not my problem.
Well, he's actually reached out to the Chinese and said to Xi, hey, you need this oil more than me. I mean, he's declared energy dominance in America, and we're basically there. These oil price spikes aren't impacting America near as much as it's impacting Europe and other parts of the world. So, in fact, he's exactly right. He wants to open the straits. He's willing to commit forces to do that. This is an international violation. This is not about the war. And I think the UK should step in where it can and really join the alliance and help these ships get through the straits, the Red Sea, and let's open up this free flow of commerce.
Can I ask you also just about the thinking behind this action? Again, there's no doubt at all in my mind, and we know America has particular history with Iran in terms of the Iranian hostages and the threat to the death to America and all of this. I mean, there's no doubt at all. Iran is the problem. When people talk about we shouldn't get involved in the chaos of the Middle East, Iran is the chaos of the Middle East. They've been directing all of the terror attacks, all of the issues with it. It's Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthi rebels. They are the problem. Taking out the Iranian regime should be an aim for every country. What you're willing to do about it is the issue. But how much of this is about dealing with Iran? How much of this is about world, I suppose, spheres of interest and indeed preparing for the future battles with bigger powers, as was what people say, action in Venezuela, taking out the ability of the Venezuelans to basically route these oil tankers, still a major oil producer, of course, taking out, both Iran and Venezuela and their ability to provide oil to China, a hostile nation state, a rival in terms of the Far East Asia, in terms of the South China Seas, to America. How much of this is about global politics rather than about purely Iran?
I think this is, if you understand the Trump doctrine and every decision he's made from the first day of his administration, I can walk myself to a go start date to take out Iran. Iran was always the regime, not the people. The regime was going to be a distraction and create havoc globally. So this is very much a global thinking of the president. He's worried about China. He's worried about Russia. He's worried about global commerce. So everything he's doing, I can align to a certain strategy. The decision to take out the Iranian regime was based on exhausting every other effort to get them to stop pursuing a nuclear weapon. Because once they have a nuclear weapon, then the game is completely changed. And so I believe that what President Trump is doing is saying, look, we have to corral these belligerents. Otherwise, we're all going to deal with the ramifications of a nuclear-armed Iran for the next century.
Okay, and just finally, how does this end? When does this end?
I think the regime, it's really hard to put a date on regime collapse. I think we're well on the way. The military campaign is basically over. So you can consider the fight to be over. You're not going to see troops on the ground. You're not going to see an Iraq war. Now, the question is opening the straits to free flow of commerce. The Iranians have closed the straits many times before in a non-war environment. So this is the second stage of what President Trump has been planning, is opening the straits. He knew that he would deal with this, but first and foremost, win the conflict. And basically, he's won the conflict. And now it's really up to the Iranian people to take back their own country.
Okay, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much. Hope you'll come back on again. Rear Admiral Mike Hewitt, a former Pentagon official, former ex-US naval officer as well. Claire Pillsbury, interesting to hear from a strategic thinker and a former Pentagon official, and someone in the US military. As also, we've also spoken to someone very senior in the British military as well. How much their thinking is alike.
And that's the really interesting thing. When you get people like that involved, they know their stuff, they understand it. My worry is that there aren't enough people like that surrounding the president in America, because global thinking, which is what Mike Hewitt has just said that Donald Trump does, I'm not convinced he actually does that.
I'm never convinced that there is a plan, and that's the thing. And again, It's not Trump derangement syndrome.
It's not.
And I know that he often says a load of stuff and tweets a load of stuff that maybe not is, it sounds like it's all over the board. I worry that he is very much influenced by the last person he spoke to, as opposed to having a plan.
And I think that's my concern as well. And if you had more people like the two guests that you've had today, Tom Sharp and Mike Hewitt, if you had people like that around him, I think the decisions would be very, very different.
I trust Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. He seems to be smart. Very sound and very smart and very knowledgeable. And a lot of the stuff he's saying now, you look back, he was saying this stuff in 2015. And that's the thing. Also, again, you've got to remember that Donald Trump is somebody who has been very dismissive of soldiers, basically saying, he's been caught on tape. This isn't made up, caught on tape, saying that he thought, despising basically, the American soldiers who risked their lives, because this is a man, of course, managed to avoid going to fight in Vietnam. It's absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Really knowledgeable, really experienced guests giving their tuppence worth. We've given our tuppence worth. Love to hear yours. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just some breaking news from the UK HSA, Health Security Agency. They've said the number of cases related to that meningitis outbreak in Kent has risen from 11 to 15, which is a concern. They are finding more cases, because we were talking earlier, weren't we, with Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at Oxford University, about these people queuing up getting antibiotics. This is about preventing the spread, because if you've got the antibiotics, then it will stop you spreading if you've got it. But they're still trying to trace everybody who was 5th, 6th and 7th of March. So over a week ago, over 10 days ago, being at the same nightclub, and 1,600 people max at these nightclubs, these big student nights, teenage nights, and people being, possibly getting, sharing vapes, sharing drinks, having a snog, passing it on. Although it's got a much shorter incubation date, someone having it and not getting serious symptoms, passing it on to someone else, passing it on to someone else.
And that's your problem, isn't it? Because people move around, people travel. So just because they were in a club in Canterbury doesn't mean that they live solely in Kent. They could be in London.
Students, sit down. Do not move and stop kissing people.
Can you imagine? Put that out there on a leaflet. You can what reaction you'd get to that.
I'm not one of those student people. I don't think that's going to work.
No, it really isn't. So we don't know how far this has gone, and we do need to be incredibly careful.
Be careful. Don't panic. You don't have to shut the world down.
No, you don't.
You just need to be looking out for the symptoms,
and you need to be looking out for each other. So every sort of uni student needs to keep an eye on their mates.
Yeah, your mate gets a bad headache, the stiff neck. That is far more of an early sign than the rash.
Yeah,
but just if in doubt. And again, don't wait 2 days for a GP appointment.
No,
seriously,
into hospital. Off you go.
Yeah. Just play safe.
Yeah, and if they say we're from the university and we think it's meningitis, they will get seen as a priority.
Yeah, I would say when I took my daughter in, years ago, when she was 3 years old, frightened the living daylights out of me.
I can't imagine.
And genuinely, the paediatrician met us at literally. She was out of my arms and on a drip within seconds getting those antibiotics. It does work. It is a serious disease. 12:22 is the time. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to get to your calls. Massing up on the board. We'll try and get to as many as we can. This is Talk.
Do you think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:25 is the time. Let's get to your calls. Lots of calls coming in about Iran and could we have fuel rationing for motorists as a result of this crisis, a war that we're not involved in very much, but mainly because we've got a dithering Prime Minister and let's face it, we haven't really got anything to fight this war with. But are we kind of involved anyway? And what do you make of Donald Trump's criticism of Keir Starmer's what he called terrible leadership? I mean, hey, it's like family. We can say it, Trump. You don't get to say it. It's just a family thing now. Anyway, let's get to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000. Peter is on the line from Buckinghamshire. Hello, Peter.
Julia, hi. Just to say that, firstly, I just love your spirit.
God bless
I don't
you,
agree
sir.
with everything you say.
Why not?
I think you're...
Close the phone line down.
Now, I really want to look at Europe and Trump. Because I feel that with Europe, they do not trust Trump.
No.
They see Trump as attacking them all the time. Yet they look at how Trump is with Russia, and he does nothing against Russia.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of Ukraine. I've travelled there for many years as a pilot, and now I don't, but I used to. They're a great country, they're great people. And one effect of Iran is that it's taken the spotlight again off Ukraine.
Yeah.
Trump has cut off all funding for Ukraine. He's cut off all weapon deliveries for Ukraine. Even the ones that have been bought are delayed.
Yeah.
And I think what Europe should do is this. They should do a deal with Trump. And they say, look, we don't trust what you're doing, but you put sanctions back on to Putin. You stop his oil deliveries, which are putting 10 billion into his account. Yep. And you also increase sanctions on Russia, because Ukraine are actually doing quite well at the moment. You increase sanctions on Russia, and you supply Russia with out-of-date American ATACMS and other military equipment, which America don't use.
Supply Ukraine,
supply Ukraine. And you do that, and then we will support you 100%.
Good point. I wonder if they've thought of doing that. I mean, Keir Starmer won't have. That would involve, thinking around things. I would have thought Merz and Macron are pretty clever.
Yeah, I think Starmer is too weak, and I totally go with you on energy. I mean, I've been a pilot all my life, so I totally go with you on the energy side of it, and I totally go with you on the immigration side. But I do think that Starmer is petrified of the Muslim.
Yeah, this is a domestic. It's that's the thing. We with brilliant guest Matt Goodwin on the show yesterday. Do go back and look at that on YouTube, by the way, or on my social media feed. I mean, it just, when you think about the influence, just a tiny, 4 million plus population of Muslims in this country are having in terms of our our politics right now. Imagine when it's far, far greater.
Yeah, and I think you've got Mohammed as the most popular baby name in the UK again.
But it's impacting our foreign policy decisions, which has an impact on not just us but the world.
Yeah, but I think from Europe, I don't kind of pinpoint on the UK, but from Europe's point, they need to make a deal with Trump, and they need to get Trump to actually show that he's not an ally of Russia, which comes across of the years.
Yep.
And they need to say, right, we will agree to support you in Iran, but you supply the weapons, you supply the sanctions.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Let's put this idea. Keir, if you're listening, mate, Peter's got a good plan, better than any of your little advisors. But anyway, stop listening to them. They're all mates with Mandelson. Anyway, great call. Thank you so much, Peter. Let's go to Louise, who is in Kent. Hello, Louise. What do you want to say?
Oh, hi. Well, actually, a couple of things, Julia, because I completely agree with you over the climate. I mean, we're fighting lots of solar farms down here in Kent.
Yeah.
Absolute flipping nightmare. And I want to know, Ed Miliband constantly says, and I actually said within hours of hearing about Iran, I literally put on one of the sites fighting it on social media. I said, what's the best thing within hours? Ed Miliband said, this will ramp up our need for wind and solar. Because we need secure, homegrown energy. Well, has he got a hotline, vertical hotline, to control the wind and the sun? But it's not just about energy, is it? It's only the 20%. That bloke you had on, he wouldn't have any clothes. Emperor with no clothes, because all of his clothes have some kind of fossil fuel input to make them, medicines, the lot, all of it.
I think people just have no idea. Again, as I say, they're trying to wean us off fossil fuels. That's like trying to wean us off oxygen. 21st century existence requires fossil fuels. Full stop.
The other thing I was going to say was I read a brilliant article the other day about why the West is so reluctant to help Trump at the moment, when somebody in the White House has been abusing us for so long. Don't forget, he said we didn't have any input and do anything significant in the Iraq when we stepped up after 20, that bit. He's abused us, he's put tariffs on us, he's trashed us all over. I get that, but I can't help wondering now if he's asking help for the Hormuz because they've made a drastic error in understanding how the Iranians would.
Yeah, which I find mind-boggling, because I can't believe they haven't.
But my feeling is that he's now in trouble with that, and now he needs our help. If that hadn't been a problem, I bet you he wouldn't have asked.
No, indeed. Well, essentially, I've got a message from, we've got some texts and tweets coming in. Morgan's message: Trump week 1, we will win. Trump week 2, we are winning. Trump week 3, we have won. Trump week 4, please send help, which does sound like... Can I ask you about something I've just been handed? Reform UK have done a press conference this morning, a rally in London. We've had Nigel Farage and the Treasury spokesperson, Robert Jenrick. And one of the things they are doing, they're promising to scrap VAT and green levies on household energy bills if they win power. They say it will save the average family around £200 a year. I'm surprised it's not more, to be honest. But basically, there's going to be a cost of that, obviously. But then if you're getting rid of all the subsidies to all of these things, you can save a lot of money. But they've also launched a prize draw to promote that announcement, the party promising to pay the energy bills of the winner and their entire street if they win. What do you think about that?
Well, the first thing I would say is right from the very beginning, they always said, well, the sun and the wind is free energy and we'll reduce all your energy bills, and even if you pay, we'll get you down to nothing for electric.
Yeah.
But that's only that because I've always said if they can reduce the cost of the electric, but they'll balance that by increasing the daily standing charge. Then when the electric's down to nothing, our bills will still be very high because our standing charges go up. And then they can say, well, we told you we'd do it because we've reduced your electric. No, because my standing charge is now too high.
There'll always be a technicality, won't there? Louise, thank you very much indeed. Well, she's from your part of the world, Claire Pearsall, in Kent as well. What do you make of this from launching this prize draw to promote its announcement about cutting VAT and green levies and household energy bills? Huge amount of your energy bills, although actually it's I mean, there's a cost to that in government, but they say they've worked that out. It's 5% on household energy bills VAT. Scrapping the levy would save the average household £78 a year based on current prices, but if prices increase, the savings would be higher. But this promoting this by having a competition, so not only will we pay your energy bills for the entire year, we'll pay your... I live in quite a long street. Everyone would love that. Your entire street. Or you'd be like, oh, not John at 72. He never puts his bins back. He wouldn't, wouldn't have an issue with that. Not having his energy bills paid. A lot of people. I mean, do you remember this morning during the energy crisis? When they got told off for a competition. I know it wasn't in breach of anything, but just we'll pay your energy bills or something, and everyone said it was all rather tacky. Do you think that's a good PR move on their part?
I think this one is fraught with danger.
They say it's fine for the electoral competition. It's not a breach of electoral law.
I disagree. I actually think it is this close to the sets of elections that are
local elections. Yeah, you're not allowed. Yes, you're not allowed to buy people a drink to vote for you. Let alone
absolutely. So I think that this is really close to the mark on that one. And I also wonder how much data people are going to have to give over in order to enter the competition in the first place.
But you lot all do that.
I know. And it's all right for us, it's other people.
I love it. We're going to talk about something completely different in a moment. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about lazy coppers. Dozens of police officers have been caught playing video games, watching porn, pretending to be at their desk, or even just at home, rather than keeping Britain's streets safe. Explains a lot, doesn't it? We'll talk about that with former Met Police DCI Mike Neville. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's just approaching 12:37. Just to let you know, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is due to give an update on the outbreak of meningitis in Kent to MPs in the Commons very, very soon. We'll let you know what he has to say there. We certainly had a few more cases that have been identified since this morning. Right now, let's talk about something completely different. Dozens of police officers have been caught watching porn, playing video games, or pretending to be at their desk when they're actually at home, when they should have been keeping Britain's streets safe. This is a Talk exclusive investigation, and it's uncovered a shocking pattern of poor discipline and dereliction of duty across police forces in England and Wales over the past 3 years. 18 officers and staff face misconduct hearings after being accused of accessing porn or other inappropriate material while on duty. According to figures from Freedom of Information requests, at least 11 were fired or resigned before they could be sacked. But bearing in mind, when another 36 officers faced disciplinary action for playing video games, streaming TV or checking social media channels while on shift. Some 68 officers and staff faced misconduct proceedings for other time-wasting activities alike. But bearing in mind, there will also be a huge number of cases that aren't found out and a huge number of cases that aren't ever formally prosecuted, just a quiet word, which we don't know about. Is it any wonder there's so much crime on our streets? Let's talk to Mike Neville about this, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good afternoon to you, Mike. Does any of this surprise you?
Well, it doesn't really, Julia. And the figures you mentioned, of course, only about 3/4 of the police force has actually answered the Freedom of Information Act request, so there's even more.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just shameful. It is shameful in the sense that when you join the police or you become a firefighter or a nurse or anything like that, you join to serve the public. And then you get people who are lazy and abuse this. And, of course, what exacerbates the situation is when people are allowed to work from home. And it's always shocked me that, police officers could be allowed to work at home on matters like intelligence and things like that, where you should be in a police station, in a secure building. And also, there's the supervision. You've got a sergeant there, an inspector there who's checking up on what's going on. But also you've got the support of colleagues, and you can ask them what's happening. Because one of the massive problems in the police is the lack of experience. So the fact you've got some, junior officers sat at home, allowed to do what they want. It's almost like, can you believe that they would do stupid things like look at porn?
Funny enough, yes, I could. I find the watching of porn. I mean, look, we had an MP watching porn in the House of Commons, for goodness.
No, it's a tractor porn.
No one knew there was such a thing as tractor porn until then. But there we are. You learn something new every day. I've led a sheltered life. What can I say, Mike? But there's no doubt at all. There are huge numbers of people who, while they're at work, will be sending messages to people. They're booking a holiday. They're checking, you get those flights done, or arranging their social life. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people do it in the public sector. A lot of people do it in the private sector. And I suppose there's an element where, for a lot of employers, they kind of have to accept that a lot of the time. Obviously, bearing in mind people, they're stuck at their desks all day. They're not taking an hour lunch break. They go and do it, so they're doing it in that time they would have spent otherwise. You could justify it, but when there are certain jobs like, like police officer, like a doctor, like a teacher or a social worker, you think, no, but we rely on you to be doing your job properly all the time. Otherwise, lives could be lost.
And not only that, Julie, but just common sense dictates. You don't get done for doing it once, do you? You've done it 5, 10, 15 times before, like the skipper, the sergeant intervenes in this, and then you've got these individuals who do all this, putting something in the keys in the computer so it looks like they're actively working, and it's really shameful. You're stealing public money. Your duty is to protect the public, to prevent crime, and there you are taking the absolute mickey out of the whole system. And so we need to look again at this work from home. There's also people now just see it as a sort of right. And like I say, when you're dealing with secure information, things that are, really impact on people's privacy, data protection stuff, sensitive information, there's no way, in my view, you should be doing that from home. You should be in a police station, being properly supervised.
And as you say, sharing of information between different police officers, knowing about what's going on, but also crucially the training up of younger people. This is so absolutely vital, and people just knowing knowing that they're supposed to be somewhere for their workplace. I mean, again, unless you've got a specific role, something specific that needs quiet, maybe you can go and do that particular role, and we know how long that's going to take. And I think that's a very, very different thing from this routine working from home. I just don't see how it works. And again, I'd rather they were on the streets. And this comes to our next story I wanted to ask you about, which is corner shops. Shopkeepers who, these are the ones which are run by families, where you've got your 16-year-old working behind the till on a Sunday. People just, basically it's a family business, people living above the shop often. They're now being enforced to impose effectively a crime tax on every sale to combat the shoplifting epidemic. We've got a record £313 million being spent by shopkeepers to keep their stock secure and, of course, their staff safe as well. And they're basically having to put that money into security tagging, CCTV, protective screens, facial recognition cameras, and AI store monitoring, or indeed just even having store detectives. And it's effectively an 11p crime tax. But this is the thing, because the police aren't there doing their job, because apparently they're looking at porn while they're at work.
And what's worse here, Julia, I did an FOI myself on one of Britain's biggest police forces, and I found out that they received in 1 year just over 7,000 images of suspects committing crime. Now, most of those images will be thieves, because that's the most prevalent offence, mostly shoplifting. And I asked them, what's happened? How many of those were identified? They didn't know. How many of them have been charged? They didn't know. What kind of business would operate that stupid model? Because some shopkeepers invested in CCTV to keep them, their property and them and their staff safe. And then the police have got the image and they have no idea what they've done with it. So, the shopkeeper in essence is wasting their time. Yeah. And then the other really dangerous thing you see is more violence against shopkeepers, because now these thieves, times old, you see, look for an image of a shoplifter, it shows something like sticking something in the jacket. Yeah. Now they're like blatantly filling up a bag and walking out.
Oh, no, my local supermarket, they've been coming in, en masse. They run in, they wait for the security guards to disappear away from the booze, and they literally clear the shelves.
Yeah, but what happens then, of course, is that then when they've done that 5, 10, 15 times, they feel entitled to steal. So when somebody stops them, we saw the awful case recently in Milton Keynes where a security guard was stabbed to death. Yeah. And so this lack of police action against this.
But also, again, you're on minimum wage and you're on your own, and you're probably going to get, if you don't get stabbed, you're going to be prosecuted yourself. I've got to be honest with you. I'm saying I would make this the law. I'm not endorsing people breaking the law. I think if people who did this kind of shoplifting faced a damn good beating, I think they'd probably stop doing it. No, I'm sorry. Only if that was the law. I'm not encouraging people to break the law. I'm just saying the lessons would be learned. We're going to have to be. We're going to have to be going. We're going to flogging. We're going to have to do this. Around Malik away. I mean, you recognise the shopkeepers all recognise the people who are shoplifting. They've organised. They now have a message system between each other to alert. They close their doors. That shouldn't have to happen. It's obscene that that's happening.
The other crazy thing as well, Julie, is that the police do not have a national image database. So if you leave your fingerprints or DNA at multiple crime scenes, you link together. If you go shoplifting at 50 different stores, a lot of these people are stealing 10, 20 times a day, and they're moving around. They have no system of linking those images together. So every crime is dealt with as a one-off.
It's genuinely embarrassing, isn't it?
It is embarrassing. It's shocking.
Really is. By the way, Still no prosecution of the bloke who stole my handbag. What is it now? 21 months ago. Got my latest. I write every month. Got another update. Still waiting to identify the man. They've got a photo of. They've got his name, his last known abode. He's got numerous criminal offences. When they first tried to find him, they couldn't find him at his property because he was in prison for something else. Doesn't mean he's guilty of this crime, of course. However, the suspect, still can't find him. I've got a funny feeling if I had the detail, if I was allowed to put the details out and I asked the British public, can you find this bloke? I have a funny feeling they'd be able to find him straight away, don't you?
Yeah, Julie, but I had good news the other day. I was at Charing Cross police station, Charing Cross railway station, and there's a young police officer stood there in a proper beat duty helmet and a shirt and tie. And I said to this lad, you're the smartest officer I've seen for a long time. It was called PC Brasher, and I reported it to the Scotland Yard because the other colleagues of his I see all the time look like an absolute mess. And this young lad, he just looked like we should have British policing back. And let's hope there's more of him like that, because that will deter. He's about 6'2" tall.
Oh, that helps.
That's what we need to deter criminals, and very well done to him. And I'm glad there's some officers, and there's a lot of them out there, who are doing their best.
This is the thing. The good ones are tearing their hair out of this, aren't they? And there are a lot of good ones. Mike Neville, always great to talk to you, former Met Police DCI. Claire, you're listening to all of that. What do you want to say?
I think that's amazing that Mike actually went and put in a report about how smart that young lad was. I mean, we need more people to go into the police force, but where's the encouragement for them to do so?
Yeah,
if they're going to be
you're fast-tracked if you're from a minority as well, you see.
I mean, it's just
God forbid, we should just let people who just really want to be, Anyway.
Do you want to do it?
Indeed, exactly. Have you got the qualifications? I just let you know, Health Secretary Wes Streeting has been on his feet giving an update to MPs in the Commons about the meningitis outbreak in Kent. He said that it's an unprecedented outbreak. It's also a rapidly developing situation. Is it unprecedented? I don't think it is. Everything's historic or unprecedented these days. I don't think it is. The UK Health Security Agency, though, they have said that a small targeted vaccination programme is going to begin for meningitis B. This is the particular strain that most have been identified as having, I think, 15 students and young people now, starting with students at Canterbury campus halls of residence at the University of Kent in the coming days. So keep you up to date on that. Right now we're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be talking about, the massive spread of anti-Semitism that we've seen in this country, in particular, apparently within the NHS. Oh yeah, and people who seem to have a problem with Gale's coffee shop. We're going to be talking to the Director of Labour Against Anti-Semitism up next. This is Talk.
Do you think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about anti-Semitism. We've just seen an extraordinary rise in anti-Semitic attacks. Extraordinary, actually, even though, of course, we've also seen a rise in anti-Muslim attacks, anti-Muslim bigotry. Interesting, those are prosecuted at twice the rate of anti-Semitic attacks. We've seen ridiculously open attacks on camera, which apparently just do not merit the police getting involved, certainly not a criminal prosecution. But often we just see the the normalisation of anti-Semitism. Certainly we've seen it in the NHS, with numerous people going to hospital to find that their care workers are promoting their views on the Middle East, including their pro-Palestinian badges, but often Zionist, they would say, content on their T-shirts or on their badges, which many of us, frankly, do interpret as what it really is, which is anti-Semitism. Well, let's talk about this with Alex Hearn. He's the Director of Labour Against Anti-Semitism. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
The reason I wanted to talk to you about this was the Green Party. They're going to stage a vote at their spring conference to demand the NHS workers have the right to free speech on Gaza. More than 200,000 members are going to vote on whether the party should challenge an ongoing review of anti-Semitism in the NHS and oppose restrictions on free speech in the workplace. It's something that's been ordered by Keir Starmer last October. We had just simply too many cases of anti-Semitism in the wake, particularly of October the 7th. What do you make of this vote?
Look, even if you excuse this as political expression, a medical workplace really is not the place, especially when stats show that this is the main pretext for racist attacks against Jews. So the reality is, as Jewish doctors have said, there is a culture of fear and a toxic atmosphere. Now, the NHS, England chiefs, admit it's a problem. Health Secretary Wes Streeting admits it's a problem. We see doctors openly expressing virulent anti-Jewish racism.
Even saying that they would not save a Jewish person's life. We've had that on camera.
Yeah, one was filmed making a throat-slitting gesture towards Jews, describing hospitals as cesspits of Jewish supremacy. This lack of action has severely undermined trust. So why would you want to halt measures to protect the victims of racism? Well, the government has not even released a plan. So what exactly are they objecting to? The Greens have a really well-documented issue with anti-Jewish racism. So I guess them objecting to fighting it in the NHS isn't really surprising. And it's not the Greens' only problematic motion, by the way. Another calls to revive the anti-Semitic Soviet propaganda from the 1970s that Zionism is racism. So it sounds like quite a lot of their conference will be about opposing Jewish rights.
Yes, well, it's certainly not going to be about eco issues. They used to care about. I mean, last time I looked, the Green Party were really, really concerned about the world was about to be on fire or drown or whichever it was this week, and they were all concerned about the environment. Now it's very much all about Gaza. We saw that with the Gorton and Denton by-election and Hannah Spencer's campaign. But here's the thing. I mean, this is about the right of people to express their political views at work. Now, people are entitled to to have free speech. But yet, in the workplace, when you're public-facing, a lot of us would say, I'm not entirely sure I want to hear your political views. Now, I don't actually want someone wearing their geopolitical views on their lapel in the workplace if they're dealing with me as a customer or indeed as a patient at any point. I don't even want to know if someone, supports Arsenal. I don't think that there's any place in the workplace when you're customer facing, particularly in the NHS, when you've got vulnerable people you're dealing with, that you should feel the need to impose or publicise your views at all.
Jews have seen a massive rise in hate crime, and when you're being treated for your health is when you feel at your most vulnerable.
Yep.
And it's the only time that I know when people hide their Star of David, feeling it could affect their treatment. A friend of mine's being treated for cancer. She's a prominent figure in the local community, prominent Jewish figure. And, it's unpleasant for her. I was in a Facebook group of about 16,500 GPs regularly discussing racist conspiracy fantasies about Jews, such as the synagogue attack in Manchester being a false flag, and describing Hamas as a liberation army, with only a few pushing back. These are the people treating me. That's why I hide my Star of David when undergoing medical treatment.
And that is absolutely appalling, absolutely disgusting. And the terrible thing, a lot of us are saying, and yet these are supposed to be the clever people, the nice people. They're doctors, they're highly educated, they want to do good. And yet we are seeing this, and we're seeing the normalisation of this. And it's been growing for many years. I think we've seen a lot of it under Corbyn. It's exploded since October the 7th, when, by the way, small point worth making, everyone, the Jews, the Israelis, were the victims, not the perpetrators of that. And it is extraordinary, it's great. But we've even got the absurdity. I mean, genuinely, I was trying to explain this story earlier. We asked Kemi Badenoch about it, was she going to go to Gale's Bakery? So Gale's, lots of people won't know. They won't have a Gale's anywhere near them. It's a very fancy schmancy bakery and cafe chain. Really rather expensive, your bread and croissants are good. I mean, it is a shop that very much, and I know the owner, we love you, Luke, but nevertheless, you go and you go, how much for a loaf of sourdough? I mean, I'm just going to get out a second mortgage to buy a loaf of bread. But very popular, very successful chain. Now, there's been this Guardian article, and again, trying to explain this because it's so ridiculous, it's almost impossible to understand. But a Guardian article, a so-called opinion piece by a journalist, Jonathan Liu, he wrote a piece on Saturday about the repeated vandalism of the North London Archway branch of Gales, and basically appearing to think it was probably understandable, but accused the bakery chain, it's a brand new one, of heavy-handed high street aggression against Palestinians simply by setting up one of their bakeries and cafes just down the road from a Palestinian cafe. I mean, it's the most bizarre, ridiculous thing. He's been accused of blatant, open, anti-Zionism, which I think, let's call it what it is. Most people would see it as anti-Semitism. No issue, apparently, with the local Costa or Starbucks setting up, but he has got an issue with Gales. Because Gales was originally opened by an Israeli baker and is now owned by a sort of an American company, the venture capital firm that has actually invested in Israeli defence and cybersecurity companies. And for that, there is an issue with this cafe being on the British High Street. This is crazy territory.
Yeah, that article was disgusting. It's bigotry disguised as moral commentary. The only reason Gales was singled out, rather than other businesses with equally tenuous links to Israel, is because it once had a Jewish founder. And that's why protesters are shouting at croissants. They imagined it was a Jewish business and smashed its windows. They graffitied that it was not local, in other words, foreign, and they called to reject, one of the slogans said, reject corporate Zionism, which was spray painted on Gales. Another term for capitalist Jews, right? All fancy ways of whipping up classic fear and hate.
This is literally the stuff that the Nazis were daubing on shop windows.
Yeah, as I said, locals have expressed alarm, but now a Guardian writer excuses smashing those windows by calling it petty symbolism. So let's just rewrite the history books, because we have a new, more progressive description for Kristallnacht. The author describes where you buy your coffee as a war. On one side, you have Gales, representing the evil stereotypes of Jews, as the author sees it, greedy, overcharging customers, not truly British, with this supernaturally powered high street aggression bullying the poor indigenous Palestinian cafe. And they are, of course, not symbolic of any conflict. Those two cafes don't have a separate clientele entirely. People aren't picking a side for war when they buy coffee. Gales is not a Jewish establishment.
But I'm now going to have to go to Gales and buy an overpriced loaf of bread, because I thought on principle, if they're going to make it that, then I'm playing. Alex Hearn, it's just a source of national shame. That's what it is.